Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where the sky just won't stop weeping, the ground is soft as a kitchen sponge, and your boots have basically become your second skin. The year is 1315, but honestly it could be any long rain-soaked day in the endless misery that's about to unfold. This is not the story of a sudden disaster. This is the slow, sopping, wet undoing of an entire continent, and you, yes, you, are about to find out why the Great Famine was worse than even the infamous Black Death. You probably won't survive this, but don't let that keep you from listening. So before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 a.m? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey together here on Timeless Sleep. You trudge along the rutted track just outside your village, listening to the squelch of mud around your feet. Your cloak is already soaked through, the edges heavy with water and the distinct sour scent of mildew. Rain falls so steadily that you can barely remember the last dry day. The only measure of time now is the slow sag of your roof beams and the silent, hopeless looks your neighbours give you in passing. The world, for all its size, has been reduced to an endless patchwork of puddles. You pause to look up at the sky. A futile gesture, but what else can you do? The clouds are a solid, iron-grey ceiling, unbroken for weeks. A small, bitter part of you almost wants to laugh. After all, wasn't it just a year ago when everyone was worried about drought? Remember when water was a blessing, not a curse? You shake your head, droplets flying from your hair like the world's most pitiful dog. The rain has been falling, not for days, not for weeks, but for months. It began in the spring of 1315, a year that historians now call the opening act of the Great Famine. But back then, to you, it was just another inconvenient change in the weather. It didn't matter at first if the seeds you planted in the sodden fields took a little longer to sprout. There was still hope then. Hope is a slippery thing. It clings even as you watch the streams overflow their banks and the road to the next town disappear underwater. You remember stories your grandmother used to tell about bad years and hungry times, but none of those stories prepared you for the endless, monotonous misery that creeps into your bones. Each day is a repeat of the last. Get up, mop the floor, check the thatch for leaks, sigh as you watch your breath fog in the chilly, unseasonable air. The first real sign that something is wrong comes not from the sky, but from the earth. Your neighbour, old Bertil, is the first to admit it. There's nothing but rot in my potatoes, nothing but rot, and the smell of it stays in my hands. You nod, trying not to look at your own pathetic crop. You've started to develop a kind of sixth sense for the squelch that means disaster, the sound a root makes when it's pulled up too soon, pale and limp, more water than food. Historians still argue whether the famine began with the weather or with the land itself, but you're not interested in scholarly debates. You just want something, anything, that will fill your stomach without making you sick. The rain is more than a nuisance. It's an enemy, and every day it wins a little more ground. By midsummer, the world has changed in subtle ways. The river that used to be a trickle beside your home is now a brown, churning monster. Fences lean in the mud, as if they too are tired of holding out. Children are quieter. There's less laughter, less singing in the fields. The old tunes sound wrong in all this damp. Your mother's voice, always so strong, now cracks as she sings lullabies to your younger siblings, each note thin and uncertain. You catch yourself counting how many loaves are left in the pantry, how many jars of beans, how many days until the rain finally stops. There's a joke that gets whispered around the village. Don't worry about getting old this year, you'll just get soggy. You laugh, but it's the dry kind of laugh that makes your chest ache. The world's most mainstream historical fact about the Great Famine, it wasn't just a single bad harvest, but 3 whole years of relentless crop failure, from 1315 to 1317. People have starved before, but not like this, not all at once, not everywhere you look. This is the difference. There is no somewhere else to send a pleading letter for help. Your world is drowning, and so is everyone else's. You try to salvage what you can. You dig ditches in vain attempts to drain the fields, pile rocks in front of your door to keep the flood out, tie up your skirts and curse the mud as it clings to your legs like a jealous child. Once you find a frog in your bed, and for a moment you think about keeping it, just in case things get desperate. Frog legs taste like chicken, someone says, but I'd settle for just the chicken. Historians still argue whether people in 1315 realised how bad things would get. Some say they remained hopeful until the end. Others insist that panic set in almost immediately. But you, trudging through mud that sucks at your boots and memories of dry bread, know only that each day brings less food, less warmth, less light. Sometimes, at night, you hear the rain on the thatch and wonder if the world is simply being washed away, grain by grain, hope by hope. The fringe tidbit you cling to, because even in misery people will find their jokes, is that some folks try to predict the end of the rain by watching the behaviour of ducks. If the ducks swim toward the church, old Bertil says, the rain will stop soon. You watch the ducks for hours, praying for them to make up their minds. Spoiler, the ducks have no clue. Every so often you remember a story told by the travelling merchant last year, about how the Nile would flood and Egyptians would rejoice. Here, a flood just means another round of digging ditches and another ruined dinner. You envy the Egyptians, if only for their optimism. Days blend into nights. Nights blend into dreams, and your dreams are nothing but water. Water over the roads, water in the fields, water leaking from the very sky. There's an odd kind of beauty to it all, if you squint. The way the lantern light reflects on the puddles, the shimmering haze of rainbows in the morning. You'd appreciate it more if you weren't so hungry. You try to find comfort in old routines. You mend clothes by the fire, though it never gets quite warm enough. You watch your father scan the sky, as if he can bargain with the clouds. You play with your siblings, inventing games that involve pretending you're rich enough to have dry shoes. Once, you actually see the sun break through. A single golden beam on a sea of grey. It feels like a blessing, but it's gone in minutes. The old herbalist in your village claims to have a cure for the wetness, which involves stuffing dried sage into your boots and tying bundles of garlic over the door. Historians still debate whether such folk remedies offered psychological comfort, but you suspect the only cure for the rain is time, and a good roof, if you can afford one. Sleep comes in fits and starts. The constant drip, drip, drip of water from the rafters is enough to drive anyone mad. Some nights, you dream that you're drowning, not in water, but in hunger. You wake with your stomach aching, more tired than when you fell asleep. Even the animals are unhappy. The cows have stopped giving milk, the chickens roost in the rafters to escape the rising damp, and the pigs? Well, let's just say you haven't seen the pigs for a while, and you're trying not to think about what that means. There are days when you feel like you're living at the end of the world. You start to measure time not in weeks or months, but in small indignities. The day the well water turned brown, the day the path to church disappeared under a lake, the day the last onion sprouted a crop of mould. You grow used to disappointment, to hunger, to the sound of your own heart beating faster every time you look at the empty pantry. One morning, you wake to find that the roof has finally given up. Water pours through the thatch, drenching your straw mattress and turning the floor into a shallow pool. Your father curses under his breath. Your mother weeps quietly, and you just start scooping water out the door with an old bucket. It's almost funny if you don't think about it too hard. You begin to develop rituals, small ways to ward off despair. You count the steps from the door to the garden, recite old prayers for sunshine, hide a crumb of bread in your pocket for good luck. Sometimes the only thing that gets you through the day is the memory of dry socks. As the rain continues, you notice changes in yourself and the people around you. Tempers flare more easily, laughter is rarer, and even the village gossip seems to have run out of stories. Historians still argue whether communities pulled together or fell apart during the Great Famine. In your village, it feels like a bit of both. You find yourself staring out the window, watching the rain. You wonder if it will ever stop, if you will ever see the sun again, if there is a world beyond this sodden patch of earth. It's a kind of hunger, but not for food, for certainty, for hope, for the chance to start again. The biggest joke, of course, is that you always thought you'd die of something dramatic. An arrow in battle, a fever, even old age. But here you are, being undone by something as ordinary as rain. Eventually you stop marking the days. Time has become meaningless, measured only in the slow erosion of hope and the shrinking pile of food. You go to bed hungry, wake up hungrier, and tell yourself it's just a bad year. Just one bad year. But deep down, you know, it's not just the rain, it's the beginning of something much, much worse. You start to dream about food, not just the usual dreams, a hot stew, a feast at the Lord's table, a thick slice of bread so fresh the crust crackles when you bite it, but dreams so vivid you can taste them. You wake up with your teeth sunk into your own tongue, and for a split second, you're certain you can smell roasting onions and butter in the air. Then you remember, onions don't grow in standing water, and butter is something you haven't seen in months. If you're lucky, you still have a few roots left in the pantry, but most of them are soft and sprouting, flecked with mould, smelling faintly of old socks. You stare at the pile, try to will them into being edible, and when that fails, you start peeling anyway, hoping you'll find enough good flesh under the rot to make a meal. Some days you settle for boiling what's left in a battered pot, hoping the water and a little salt will make it taste like something more than defeat. Salt is precious now, hoarded and traded like jewels. You learn quickly that hunger isn't just an emptiness in your belly. It's a persistent ache in your bones, a sour taste in your mouth that lingers even after you've eaten. The world is quieter now, and your own footsteps seem to echo louder as you cross the empty yard behind your cottage, trying not to think about the rumbling in your stomach or the anxious looks your parents exchange when they think you're not watching. You see it everywhere. The way your neighbour's dress hangs loose on her shoulders, the way the blacksmith's arms, once thick and strong, look leaner every day. There's a moment early in the famine when you convince yourself that things will turn around. After all, the rain can't last forever, can it? You remember the stories your uncle told about lean years, times when you'd have to stretch the flour or eat more turnips, but always with the promise that better days were coming. Now, even the turnips have given up. They rot in the ground, their tops slimy and pale. You dig one up out of habit and the smell hits you. Sharp, sour, unmistakable. You bury it again, feeling oddly guilty, like you've disturbed a grave. Historians still argue whether the famine was caused mostly by the weather or by deeper problems. Overfarming, exhausted soil, a medieval diet that depended too much on a handful of crops. You're not a scholar, you're just hungry. Still, you remember your father's muttered curses, how he blames the lords for raising rents and the priests for not praying hard enough. You wonder if there's anyone left to blame now that even the king's stores are running low. Most days you gather wild greens, sorrel, nettles, dandelions, anything that looks edible. You learn to tell the difference between what fills your stomach and what gives you cramps. If you're lucky, you find a few mushrooms hiding under a log, though you know well enough to avoid the ones with bright caps. Someone's always got a story about the time their cousin ate the wrong toadstool and spent 3 days speaking in tongues before he died. Still, you think, if the famine goes on much longer, someone's bound to take the risk. There's an old woman in the village who claims to know which weeds are safe. She sells her knowledge in exchange for favours, a load of firewood, a scrap of wool, the promise of a meal when things improve. You watch her hands, quick and sure, as she picks through the undergrowth. She shows you how to boil nettles to take away the sting, how to slice dock leaves thin and mix them with a little oat flour to make rough green cakes. They taste of grass and earth, but they keep you alive for another day. A few families start to keep secrets. You notice it first when you visit the neighbour's house. The fire burns low, the children are quiet, and there's a strange, greasy smell you can't quite place. Later, you realise they've boiled the last of their leather shoes to make a thin, gluey soup. It's a trick borrowed from stories about distant starving armies. If it keeps you walking, it keeps you alive, someone says. You tell yourself you'd never stoop that low, but hunger has a way of changing your mind. You remember the market days when the village square was full of stalls, the air thick with the smells of roasting chestnuts, baked apples, fresh bread. Now, when you walk to town, you find the stalls empty or worse, full of people selling nothing but promises. The miller, once a plump, jolly man, stands behind his counter, with only a handful of coarse flour and a haunted look in his eyes. He tells you he's grinding acorns into the mix these days, anything to make it last a little longer. Mainstream historians agree on one thing. Across Europe, from Ireland to Poland, grain harvests failed in the summer of 1315. It wasn't just your village, or your shire, or even your country. Everyone, everywhere, seemed to be hungry at once. There was nowhere left to turn, no rich uncle in a neighbouring county, no merchant with a secret stash. Some of the lords, faced with starving tenants, tried to import grain from abroad, but even those ships came up empty. The whole continent was drowning, and no one could bail it out fast enough. As the months pass, hunger becomes a kind of constant companion, a second shadow. You try not to think about it, but it's always there, lurking in the background, shaping every thought, every action. You start to avoid the kitchen, knowing there's nothing left to find. You drink more water, trying to trick your body into feeling full. Sometimes it works for a little while. Sometimes it just makes you hungrier. You watch as your siblings grow thinner, their faces gaunt, eyes sunken. The youngest cry at night, not from nightmares, but from the slow ache in their bellies. You remember when your baby brother was fat and red-cheeked, always giggling. Now, he barely smiles. You carry him sometimes because he's too weak to walk all the way to the river. You tell him stories about better days, hoping he won't notice how your voice shakes. Historians still debate whether children suffered more than adults during the famine. Some say the old were the first to go, their bodies too frail to survive the long hunger. Others argue that children, with their growing bones and constant need for food, wasted away fastest. In your house, it seems like everyone is shrinking. The lines between childhood and adulthood blur. You feel older every day, and your parents seem smaller somehow, as if the hunger is consuming their strength from the inside out. You try to make a game out of mealtime, counting out the beans, dividing the bread, pretending it's a feast. Once you carve a tiny loaf out of wood and hide it in your sister's pocket, just to see her smile. She laughs, weak but genuine, and for a moment you almost forget how bad things are. On the rare days when the rain lets up, you hurry outside, desperate for a break from the gloom. You check the fields, but there's little to see. The wheat that did sprout is yellow and stunted, laid flat by weeks of wind and water. The barley is little more than a rumour. You crouch by the edge of the field, scoop up a handful of soggy earth, and squeeze it until water runs down your wrist. You remember a story told by a passing priest, how in far-off lands, people eat rice instead of wheat, and floods are a blessing, not a curse. You wish you lived in one of those places just for a season. Historians still argue whether people understood how dependent they were on just a few crops, or whether the shock of total failure took them by surprise. You start to notice other things too. The old traditions fade away, no one bothers with the midsummer dance or the harvest feast. There's nothing to celebrate, nothing to mark except another day survived. Even the church is quieter. People still gather for mass, but the prayers are more desperate, the faces more hollow. You hear the priest stumble over the old blessings for rain, and you wonder if anyone believes them anymore. One morning you wake to find that your neighbour's house is empty. The door hangs open, the fire's gone out, and there's no sign of the family who lived there for generations. You don't ask questions. Everyone knows what it means. They've either left in search of food, or they're lying quiet somewhere, waiting to be found. The village shrinks, one house at a time. A quirky tidbit, one that still gets passed around centuries later, is that some families tried to stretch their food by eating grass and even clay. You hear the rumours, and you see the stains on your neighbour's teeth, the green smudges on their hands. Someone claims it helps, that the bitterness keeps hunger at bay. You try it once, just a mouthful, just to see. It tastes like dirt, like despair, and you spit it out. It's for cows, you mutter, wiping your mouth on your sleeve. Your mother pretends not to notice. Some nights, you talk with your family about what you'd eat if you could have anything at all. The answers are always the same: roast chicken, honey cakes, fresh apples. You promise each other that when this is over, you'll eat until you burst. You make a list, a kind of wishful thinking, and hang it above the hearth. The parchment curls in the damp, but you add to it anyway. You start to barter more, trading anything you have left: spare clothes, tools, even small trinkets from your childhood. The market becomes a place of quiet desperation. People whisper about a man in the next village who traded his wedding ring for a sack of peas. Another gave up his best boots for a single ham bone. You begin to wonder what you'd trade if you had anything left. Historians still argue whether the famine hit the rich as hard as the poor. Some say the lords hoarded their food, while others insist that even the wealthy went hungry, their cellars emptied by desperate tenants, or looted by bands of starving villagers. You hear stories about castles under siege, not by armies, but by hunger itself. In the end, it doesn't matter. Hunger is the great equalizer. It strips away pride, dignity, even hope. You notice a change in the animals too. The chickens stop laying, the cows wander listlessly, and the dogs grow thin and wild-eyed. Once, you see a cat drag a dead rat into a barn, and you turn away, pretending you didn't see it. Later you wonder if you'll envy that cat. The hunger starts to play tricks on your mind. You catch yourself staring at the empty plate long after the meal is over, imagining crumbs that aren't there. You dream of food, wake up with your mouth watering, and feel a surge of shame so sharp it makes you dizzy. You start to hide small things: an extra crust, a bit of cheese, a hard-boiled egg, anything you can save for a worse day. Your mother catches you once, and you both laugh, but there's an edge to it that wasn't there before. Sometimes you remember a story your grandmother used to tell, about a time when everyone had enough. She'd talk about feast days, tables groaning with food, neighbours dropping by with gifts. You wonder if those days ever really existed, or if they're just stories people tell to make the present seem less unbearable. You learn to live with hunger, but you never get used to it. It's a presence, a weight, a constant reminder that the world has changed in ways you can't fix. Still, you get up each morning, put one foot in front of the other, and try to make it through another day. You don't know how much longer the rain will last, or if the fields will ever yield again. You only know that you're hungry and tired, and that somehow you're still here. Sleep is restless these nights. Your dreams crowded with things that can't be named. Gnawing, empty, cold things. You wake to the sound of hoofbeats in mud and know, even before you rise, that something is missing from the yard. At first, you try to tell yourself it's only a trick of the mind. Maybe the cow has wandered into the next field. Maybe the goats are hiding in the hedges to stay dry. But as you hurry outside, heart pounding in your chest, you see the truth. The tether is snapped. The muddy ground is churned with unfamiliar prints. You run your hand along the fence, feeling the broken place where someone hungry, just like you, pried a board loose. You're not alone in this. Across the village, animals are vanishing. First it's the chickens, scrawny and stubborn, they still make a meal. Then the sheep. Finally, even the milk cows, usually the pride of any household, disappear in the night. You hear your neighbour shouting curses at the dawn, waving a pitchfork, but there's no one to blame except the rain and the hunger. Even the dogs have run off, either gone wild or gone missing. You remember stories from winters past when a fox would sneak into the hen house, but this is different. The foxes are hungry too and bolder than ever. More than once you glimpse a pair of yellow eyes in the brush, watchful, waiting for a moment when no one's looking. Sometimes you think you and the fox are the same, both desperate, both hungry, both ready to do what you must. The oddest part is how quietly it all happens. You'd think people would fight harder to keep their animals, but most just sigh, mourn in silence and move on. There are whispers, of course. Old Mrs. Rutter claims she saw 3 men dragging a calf through the woods, but no one believes her. She's half blind and given to seeing ghosts at the best of times. Still, every morning brings new losses, new silences in the barns. Historians still argue whether most animals were stolen, eaten by their owners in secret, or simply died of neglect. Some say desperate families sold their last cows for pennies to passing traders, hoping for a little grain or a few coins. Others think the starving simply turned on their own animals, unable to watch them waste away. The truth, as always, is muddier than the roads. You're ashamed the first time you consider eating something you never would have thought of before. The old draft horse, faithful and bony, stands in the stable, ribs showing through his coat. He's too weak to plough, too tired to even shy at thunder. Your father looks at him, then at you, then back at the empty feed sack. It's not right, he mutters, but it's better than starving. You both know what's coming. That night, you eat in silence. The meat is tough, stringy, but it fills your stomach and you don't speak of it again. You remember a story, half rumour, half warning, about a family in the next village who ate their dog. Desperate times, your uncle says, shaking his head. No one laughs. You notice the neighbour's dog has gone missing too, but you don't ask questions. The market, what's left of it, is a grim place now. Livestock pens stand empty, the only sound the caw of a lone crow. Once these stalls rang with shouts, haggling, and the cheerful clatter of the hooves on cobblestone. Now, the only thing for sale is desperation. A man stands by the well offering a scraggly hen for a whole month's wages. "It's all I have," he says, voice breaking. No one buys. Who can afford to when a loaf of bread is a fortune? A quirky tidbit surfaces among the rumours. People begin to steal not just livestock but bones. Old soup bones, buried in the midden, dug up, boiled again and again for whatever taste of meat or marrow might remain. "Third time's the charm," someone jokes, swirling a pot of grey water. You laugh because there's nothing else to do. Some try to catch wild animals, but there aren't many left. The forests, always close and dark, seem emptier than ever. The rabbits are gone, the deer scarce. Even the birds fly in tighter flocks, wary of every human footstep. You set snares but catch nothing. Once you find a hedgehog and try to cook it, just as the old recipes say, wrapped in clay, baked in the embers. The taste is underwhelming, the clay gets stuck in your teeth, but it's food. Historians still debate whether wild game disappeared because of overhunting, starvation, or just plain bad luck. Some say the animals sensed the change, fled deeper into the woods. Others say people just got too weak to hunt. All you know is the woods are silent, and silence in the forest is never a good sign. The old pecking order breaks down, not with a bang, but with a slow, muddy whimper. There are no rich farmers left, only hungry ones. People stop visiting each other, afraid of what they might find, or be asked to share. The old woman who once had the finest herd of goats now sits by her empty barn, muttering to herself. You watch her stroke an invisible animal, her fingers curled as if around a soft muzzle. You look away. You try to keep the loss a secret. When the priest comes by, making his rounds with nothing but a blessing and a hollow look, you pretend all is well. Our flock is holding steady, you say, even though the truth is as thin as the broth in your pot. At night, you hear new sounds. The distant lowing of a cow, a quick scuffle in the lane, the lonely bark of a stray. Sometimes you think you hear something bigger, lurking just beyond the edge of the light, but you tell yourself it's only your imagination. Fear, like hunger, plays tricks. You notice the children are quieter. They used to race the sheep in the fields, sneak eggs from the hen house, chase each other through the orchard. Now they sit by the fire, watching the flames, counting the days since their last real meal. You try to distract them with stories. How St. Anthony tamed a wild boar. How clever Reynard the fox tricked the farmer. How your grandfather's old hound once chased a wolf out of the yard. They listen, but you can see their minds drifting, always back to food, to what's missing. One morning, your mother wakes you before dawn. "The pig is gone," she whispers. You run outside, find the pen empty, the gate swinging open. Muddy footprints lead away into the darkness. You're angry at first. Angry at whoever took it. Angry at yourself for not hearing. Angry at the rain for making everything so easy to sneak away. But the anger fades, replaced by something colder, something like resignation. A neighbour comes by later, carrying a sack of turnip tops and a grim expression. "You're not the only one," she says. "Last night, half the village lost something." She shares a handful of wilted greens with you, and you thank her, even though it isn't enough to fill anyone's stomach. You promise to keep watch tonight, but you know it won't help. If someone's hungry enough, they'll find a way. You begin to notice too that even the animals that remain seem changed. Nervous, thin, their ribs pressing through their skins. The old rooster, once proud and noisy, now sits quietly in the corner of the yard, feathers slick with rain. You try to feed him a few grains, but he only pecks listlessly. Once you'd have laughed and called him lazy. Now you just watch, hoping he'll survive another day. There's a superstition spreading, that animals sense death before it comes. The old folks say that if your dog won't look you in the eye, it's a bad omen. If your cow lies down and won't get up, someone in the house will die. Historians still argue whether such beliefs comforted people or just made things worse. You're not sure. You find yourself watching the animals for signs, half hoping for a miracle, half bracing for the worst. The jokes grow darker, but you cling to them. If you see a fat chicken, follow it home. That's where the food is. Or, if you can't find your neighbour, check the stew pot. No one laughs too loudly. You all know someone who's disappeared, someone who's lost everything. You hear stories of people eating things you wouldn't think possible. Cats, dogs, even rats. There's a rumour about a family that caught a swan on the river and roasted it whole, feathers and all. Tastes like hope, someone says. But hope, like meat, is in short supply. Once, a peddler passes through the village dragging a battered cart. He has nothing to sell, but he's full of stories. He claims in the next town over, people have started eating grass and bark. "I saw a man boil his own boots," he says, grinning. "Ate the laces for dessert." You buy nothing, but you listen. The stories at least are free. Sometimes you wonder what will vanish next. The animals are gone, the fields are bare, even the wild things have fled. You look at your family, at their thin faces, their hollow eyes, and you wonder how long before you too disappear. One night you hear a noise outside, a shuffle, a low grunt, the sound of wood scraping against stone. You light a candle, heart pounding, and slip outside. You see a shadow dart behind the barn, hear a muffled curse. You call out, but there's no answer. In the morning you find the last chicken gone, the coop door swinging open. You try to tell yourself it doesn't matter. After all, you'd have eaten it soon enough. But the loss stings, not just for the food, but for what it means. Nothing is safe. Nothing is certain. Not anymore. Historians still debate whether the disappearance of livestock signalled the true tipping point of the famine. Some argue it was the empty granaries, others the empty barns. For you, it's both. The absence is everywhere. In the quiet yard, the empty pens, the long silences at mealtime. The only animals that seem to thrive are the crows. They gather in the fields, black shapes against the grey sky, picking at what's left. Bad luck, someone mutters, watching them hop and caw, but the crows don't care. They go where the food is, just like everyone else. You start to mark time not by seasons, but by losses. The day the last cow disappeared. The day the chickens were stolen. The day the pig vanished without a trace. Each loss is a kind of reckoning, a reminder of how much you've given up, how much you have left to lose. You remember vaguely the stories of ancient times, how during the great sieges people ate their own leather belts and boiled shoes for supper. You wonder how far away you are from that. Hunger makes you resourceful, but it also makes you afraid. One morning you wake to find hoofprints in the mud, leading away from the house. They're deeper than any you've seen, heavy, desperate. You follow them a little way, but the tracks vanish into the woods. You stand there, rain soaking through your cloak, and realise you're crying. Not for the animal, but for yourself, for your family, for everyone who's been left behind by this relentless hunger. Yet somehow, you keep going. You find new ways to stretch what little you have. You learn to make soup from nettles, to bake cakes from roots and wild grains. You find yourself watching the sky for signs, anything to break the monotony, to bring hope. Still, the animals are gone, the fields are empty, and the hunger is always there. The marketplace used to be the beating heart of your world, a riot of colour, the mingled smells of baked bread and roasting fish, the chorus of voices haggling over prices. Now, it feels more like a hollow ribcage, picked clean by the birds. You walk through mud and straw, boots heavy, cloak pulled tight, and the only noise is the low, sullen murmur of people with nothing left to trade. Once, a trip to market was an event. You'd help your mother select the best carrots, maybe sneak a sweet if you were lucky, and always listen for the latest gossip. Market day meant hope. New shoes, new faces, new stories. Now, there are hardly any stalls at all. Most vendors have packed up or starved out. The few that remain look as gaunt as the beggars at the church door, clutching sacks of shriveled beans or bundles of last year's garlic. You pause by an empty fruit cart, its paint peeling and half submerged in a puddle. Once you bought apples here, crisp, tart, and bursting with the taste of autumn sun. Now, all that's left is the ghost of that memory and a single wormy core picked clean by rats. You step over an old dog gnawing a stick. Even the animals look at you with hungry eyes. A man coughs in the shadow of a ruined stall, trying to sell a handful of wilted greens for more than you'd pay for a plump chicken in better years. 2 pennies, he says, voice flat, and you shake your head. You can't remember the last time you held 2 pennies, let alone spent them on weeds. Everyone's eyes dart, searching for bargains that no longer exist. There's a tension that wasn't here before, a sense that the smallest slight could spiral into violence. You catch a boy pocketing a crust from a distracted vendor, and no one calls out or chases him. The laws of the market have changed. Survival has become the only rule. Mainstream historians like to point out that, during the famine, food prices didn't just rise, they exploded. Bread cost double, then triple, then 10 times what it had before the rains. Soon, it took a whole week's labour just to buy a single loaf. Inflation, they call it, as if the word alone can capture the dread that settles over your village. But you know it for what it is, a slow suffocation. It's not just grain. The old man who used to sell cheese now sits behind an empty table, his cap in his hand, staring at nothing. The dairy cows are gone, the grass in the meadows drowned, and cheese, if it exists at all, is something for the lords, not for you. There are rumours, as always. You hear about a merchant downriver who somehow secured a sack of barley and is selling it for a price that would shame a king. People flock to him, clutching rings and lockets, desperate for anything to eat. Later you hear the sack was full of sawdust and dried grass, and the merchant is nowhere to be found. You remember when your family brought eggs to market, trading a dozen for a bolt of cloth or a handful of apples. Now you cradle the last egg like a jewel, unsure if it's better to eat it or try to trade it for a few cups of flour. You hold it in your hand, feeling its weight, and realise you haven't made a real decision in weeks. Every choice is about survival, and none of them feel like winning. You see a woman arguing with a vendor, her voice shrill, demanding he lower the price of his onions. He refuses. She spits on the ground and stalks away. Later, you see her crying in the shadows, an onion clutched to her chest like a precious doll. You think about offering her a word of comfort, but you don't. Words are scarce too, and you have none to spare. A quirky tidbit surfaces, one you hear whispered behind hands. People are faking food. Loaves of bread, hard as stone, are stuffed with straw to look full and round. Some vendors sell milk that's just cloudy water. Even salt gets stretched with crushed chalk or bone dust. "Buyer beware," someone mutters. You find yourself tapping every loaf, sniffing every cask, trusting no one. Historians still argue whether the famine drove people to invent these little frauds, or if such tricks were always part of market life, just easier to ignore when food was plentiful. You suspect it's a bit of both. Hunger sharpens the mind, but it dulls the heart. One thing everyone agrees on: there are more fights now. You see two men wrestling over a single radish, rolling in the mud, cursing each other's families back to Adam and Eve. No one intervenes. By the time you finish your circuit of the market, both men are gone and the radish is nowhere to be seen. You remember when the town crier would announce market day with a bell and a rhyme, but now he just shuffles through the square, head down, voice barely a whisper. Even he seems hungry, eyes darting, hands tucked into empty sleeves. Sometimes a stranger arrives, a peddler, a monk or a tinker, offering miracle cures for famine, a bottle of bitter herbs, a prayer whispered in Latin, a scrap of parchment promising the blessing of some obscure saint. You watch as desperate people gather round, clutching their last coins. Later you see the tinker hurrying down the road, cloak bulging with ill-gotten gains. You almost admire his nerve. You notice too the change in your own heart. Once you might have shared a crust or a coin with a beggar. Now you clutch your meagre bag closer, wary of every outstretched hand. You hate yourself for it, but hunger makes you selfish. We all have our crosses, the priest says, and you nod, even as you wonder if he'd share his bread with you. The market becomes a stage for quiet despair. You see mothers bargaining away their wedding rings for a handful of beans, fathers trading tools they'll never replace. There are fewer children now, some kept home, some vanished. The laughter that once bounced off the walls is gone, replaced by the flat, echoing sound of rain. Once you find a single apple at the back of a stall, bruised but still bright. You buy it with your last coin and carry it home, holding it in your palm like treasure. You slice it thin, sharing each sliver with your family. The taste is a revelation, sweet, tart, gone too soon. For a moment you almost forget the hunger. Almost. Mainstream historians say that famine prices, more than hunger itself, tore communities apart. The rich grew richer, hoarding grain, while the poor fought for scraps. You hear stories of bakers thrown in the river for keeping back flour, millers beaten for watering down their meal. Justice becomes a luxury, like everything else. You overhear a joke in the shadows. At least you don't need teeth to eat soup. You laugh, even though your own teeth ache from gnawing old crusts. Another day you find yourself bartering with the apothecary, offering a woven basket for a pinch of dried peas. He shakes his head, then relents, trading you a handful of withered roots. Boil them twice, he says, and pray. You do, though you're not sure which part helps more. The fringe of the market grows wilder as the days pass. You see women picking through rubbish for half-rotted turnip tops, men trading scraps of parchment and bits of string. There are stories of people selling their own hair to wig makers, their teeth to apothecaries, their bodies to whoever will pay. You keep your head down, pretending not to see. A quirky tale goes around about a village where the mayor declared all bread must be weighed publicly to stop fraud. People grumbled, but it worked, at least for a while, until the mayor himself was caught with stones in his bread. Historians still debate whether these odd solutions helped, or just made things worse. There are days when the market is almost empty. No sellers, no buyers, just the rain and the memory of what used to be. You walk the square, feeling like a ghost haunting the ruins of your old life. You notice too that even the church stalls, once bustling with charity, are empty now. The alms chest is bare, the sisters gone. God helps those who help themselves, someone says, but you wonder if God is listening. You think of all the things you miss, not just the food, but the sounds, the smells, the press of the crowd, the sense of belonging. Hunger has stripped the world bare, leaving only need and regret. You barter for a little flour, mix it with water, and bake a flat cake on the hearth. It tastes of ashes, but you eat it anyway, imagining it's a feast. You remember how, before the famine, you used to complain about nothing to eat. Now you'd give anything for those days. The market, once the centre of your world, has become a symbol of all you've lost. Yet you keep coming back, hoping for a miracle, a scrap, a sliver of hope. One day, as you're leaving, you hear laughter, a real honest laugh. You turn and see a group of children splashing in a puddle, faces smeared with mud but smiling. For a moment you remember that joy still exists, even here. You tuck that memory away, carry it home like treasure, and promise yourself that no matter how high prices rise, you'll find a way to laugh again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. And so you walk home through the rain, pockets empty, heart heavy, but still hoping for the day when the market will be full again, when the world will remember what it means to be alive. The house grows smaller every week, not in the way you can see, not with walls caving in or beams bending, but in how each breath and each whisper seems to push everyone closer, tighter, together, like fish in a pond shrinking in the sun. The world outside is cold, wet, dangerous, so you huddle with your family inside, hands and knees brushing in the flickering firelight, listening to the groan of the roof and the soft, relentless drip of rain from the corners. There are 7 of you left in the cottage now. At night you hear your siblings breathing in the dark, sometimes quietly weeping, sometimes grinding their teeth with the stress of it all. Your mother tries to keep up appearances, humming old lullabies, tidying and dusting with a kind of furious energy, as if she can scrub hunger out of the rafters, but it's no use. Hunger lives here now, as real as the damp in the walls. Privacy has become a luxury. Every corner is claimed. A makeshift bed of rags for the little ones, a patch near the hearth for your grandmother, the rest of you layered together on a shared straw pallet. You twist and turn all night, aching for space, for silence, for the warmth of food in your belly. Instead, you find only elbows in your ribs and dreams of roasted meat drifting through the dark. You notice the small changes first. The way your brother's voice snaps at the slightest annoyance, the way your father keeps a tight hand on the key to the pantry. Even the baby, who once cried for attention, now seems to whimper only when she's truly desperate. The air is heavy with the scent of unwashed clothes, boiled roots, and something sour you can't quite name. You spend half your time wishing for solitude, and the other half terrified of being left alone. Mainstream historians say the Great Famine's greatest casualty was trust. Families who once would have shared everything now keep careful watch over every crumb. Suspicion grows like mould on bread. Who took the last turnip? Who's sneaking extra sips from the water jug? Even love starts to feel fragile, brittle as a winter twig. Your uncle used to visit from the next hamlet every Sunday, bringing stories, the odd treat and news of the outside world. Now, weeks pass without word. The last time he came, he looked gaunt and anxious, clutching a sack of cracked wheat as if it were a sack of gold. He left before sunset, muttering that he couldn't stay long, not with mouths to feed back home. You try not to resent him, but you do. You catch yourself thinking odd, selfish thoughts. If only there were fewer mouths, would there be more to eat? You hate yourself for it, but the thought returns every time the pot runs low. Sometimes you think everyone in the house is having the same thought, but no one dares say it out loud. You trade guilt for silence, then silence for guilt. Historians still argue whether famine brings families closer or tears them apart. Some records speak of unbreakable bonds, of shared suffering, of people pulling together. Others tell of betrayals, theft, even violence. You see flashes of both in your own home. One moment you're wrapped in a blanket with your sister, sharing whispered jokes about the past. Remember that feast when Aunt Tilda dropped the pudding in the fire? And the next you're snapping at each other over who gets the last crust. You make rituals to keep the darkness at bay. Each morning your father checks the larder while you and your siblings count out the portions. Each evening, your mother tells a story, sometimes a fairy tale, sometimes a memory from before the rain. There's comfort in the routine, in the way the same old tales seem to anchor you in a world where everything else feels unmoored. But hunger makes even the simplest things complicated. The old games you played now seem pointless. Who can chase? Who can hide when your legs feel like sticks? Instead, you invent new games. Who can spot the first signs of mould on the bread? Who can swallow water the slowest? Who can guess the next time the roof will leak? These games don't make you laugh, but they do pass the time. Sometimes you wake in the night and catch someone moving in the dark. A shadow by the pantry, the soft clink of a jar. Your father pretends not to notice when your brother sneaks a spoonful of honey, and you look away when your grandmother slips an extra crust under her pillow. There's an unspoken agreement. Don't ask, don't tell. Everyone is hungry, everyone is trying to survive. A fringe tidbit, one you're not sure you believe but have heard more than once, is that in some houses, the oldest willingly go without food so the young can eat. Your grandmother claims she once knew a woman who lived on nothing but hot water and hoped for an entire winter just so her grandchildren would see spring. You wonder if it's true or just another story to make the rest of you feel less selfish. Every cough feels like a threat. The rooms are damp and cold and the firewood is running low. When someone sneezes, heads turn, faces tighten. Just a chill, your mother insists, tucking the blankets tighter. But everyone knows how quickly a cough can turn to fever, how quickly fever can mean another empty spot at the table. Mainstream historians note that during the famine, disease followed hunger like a shadow. Weakened bodies invite sickness, colds that turn into pneumonia, cuts that fester, fevers that burn and do not break. No one wants to be the first to fall ill, but no one can avoid it forever. You hear about whole families wiped out not by starvation alone, but by sickness that crept in on a cough or a shiver. The kitchen is the only warm place in the house, but even here, the warmth feels stingy. You sit as close to the hearth as you dare, toes stretched toward the embers, hands wrapped around an empty mug. The kettle is always on, even if there's nothing but water in it. Sometimes your mother adds a handful of nettles or a pinch of dried herbs, claiming it's good for the nerves. The taste is bitter, but you pretend it helps. Your father spends hours each day fussing over the dwindling woodpile. He calculates, counts, and recites the tally under his breath like a prayer. Sometimes you wonder if he's just keeping his mind busy. There's not much wood left, and no one has the strength to go looking for more. When the fire burns low, you wrap yourself tighter and listen to the wind howling outside, imagining wolves and worse lurking in the night. A quirky joke surfaces, one you heard from your cousin, who heard it from the miller's wife. There's two kinds of hunger, the kind that makes you angry and the kind that makes you quiet. Guess which one keeps you alive longer? You decide you're in the quiet camp, but every so often the anger flashes sharp and surprising. Sometimes, when the hunger gnaws too hard, you sneak out to the yard and stare up at the rain, letting the drops wash over your face. For a moment you pretend you're anywhere else, that you're not hungry, not cold, not afraid. Then you remember the stories, the ones about people who wandered off in the rain and never came back. You hurry inside, scolding yourself for being foolish. You notice too how the hunger changes your senses. You smell everything more sharply. The sourness of unwashed bodies, the mould in the straw, the faint, maddening hint of broth from a neighbour's window. Once you find yourself digging through the ashes for scraps, half hoping to find a forgotten crust. You're ashamed, but you don't stop. A debate rages in your own mind. Is it better to stay close to family, sharing what little you have, or to strike out on your own? Some neighbours have left. Whole families vanished in the night, hoping to find better fortune elsewhere. Most don't come back. Your father insists you're safer together, but you can see the fear in his eyes. You wonder, if things get worse, whether you'll have the courage to go. You mark the days on the wall, a thin scratch for each sunrise. The marks are crowded now, a testament to survival, but also a reminder of how long you've been waiting for the rain to stop. You've forgotten what the world smells like when it's dry. You dream of food almost every night. Not feasts, but the simple comfort of bread, cheese, a bowl of warm porridge. You wake up chewing your own tongue, swallowing nothing but hope. Sometimes in the evenings you sit together and sing. The songs are old and thin, worn smooth by repetition, but they bind you together in a way nothing else can. You close your eyes, let the melody wrap around you, and pretend the world outside has vanished. But hunger waits, patient and cruel. Each day you feel yourself growing smaller, not just in body but in spirit. You wonder how much of yourself will be left when spring finally comes. You don't remember when you stopped making plans for the future. Each day is about getting through the next meal, the next night, the next storm. Hope becomes a luxury, like laughter, like sleep. You find yourself clinging to tiny comforts, a warm patch of sunlight, a shared joke, the smell of your mother's hair. They're enough sometimes to keep you going. Yet the house keeps shrinking, the hunger keeps growing, and the world outside feels further away with every passing day. You wonder, not for the first time, if things were ever really better, or if you just remember them that way. Still, you hold your family close, count your blessings, and wait for the rain to end. Your house used to be filled with noise, the chatter of children, the sing-song voice of your grandmother recalling the old days, the thump and scuffle of daily life. Now, there's a hush, a silence that settles in the bones and makes you flinch at every sudden sound. Grief doesn't shout, it seeps. It's the children and the elders who slip away first. They are, as everyone quietly knows, the weakest links in the chain, the most vulnerable in a world where there's never enough. Your youngest sister's eyes are too big for her face, cheeks sunken, lips always dry. She cries less and less each day, not because she's become braver, but because her little body is too tired to weep. Her arms, once wrapped so tightly around your neck, now feel insubstantial, as if she might blow away on the next draft. Your grandmother, sharp-tongued, fierce, a survivor of 3 bad winters, sits by the hearth more often now. She stares into the embers, mouth working silently as if chewing over old stories, old regrets. She tries to keep up the tales for the children. When I was a girl, we had a goat that danced. But the stories trail off. Some nights you catch her mouthing a prayer, lips barely moving, voice thin as cobweb. She holds your hand too tightly, and sometimes you wonder if she's more afraid for you or for herself. The elders fade quietly, shrinking into blankets, their movements growing slower, their eyes growing distant. Mainstream historians point out that the famine years were especially deadly for the very old and the very young. Some villages, it's said, lost half their children and elders before the first hungry year was even done. No one ever really recovers from the sight of a child's hollow face, or the day you notice your grandmother's hair is coming out in handfuls. You try to keep their spirits up, sing, tell stories, promise spring is coming. But your own words sound empty. Sometimes you can't help but wonder, if you have to choose who gets the last crust, do you give it to the one with more years ahead, or to the one with more memories behind? Historians still debate how families managed these brutal calculations. Was it conscious, a quiet conversation in the dark, or did it just happen, a slow turning of backs as strength failed and grief outpaced hope? You feel sick at the thought, but it haunts every meal. A fringe tidbit. In some villages, the custom arose to mark a child's growth on the doorpost with notches. Now, you notice, the new marks stop. No one wants to measure what's being lost. Your mother traces her finger over the old notches, lips trembling, then wipes her hand on her apron, as if erasing the past would change the present. It's the quiet moments that hurt the most. You remember your little sister's giggle when she splashed in puddles, the way your grandmother's hands danced over a spindle. Now, there's only silence, punctuated by coughs and the shuffling of slippered feet. When the food grows especially short, you start to skip meals for the children. Everyone does. You push your share toward your sister, nudge an extra crust toward your grandmother. She protests, but you insist. It's no real sacrifice, your appetite, like your spirit, seems to have shrunk. There are days when hope flares. A neighbour brings news that someone down the lane has traded for a little honey, or a child finds a handful of wild berries. The joy in your sister's eyes is a dagger. Sweet, sharp, gone in a blink. She eats too fast and you scold her gently, though you know you do the same. Death, when it comes, is almost gentle. Almost. One morning, your grandmother doesn't wake. She looks peaceful, a faint smile on her lips. You wonder what she dreamed in those final moments. Your mother cries quietly, your father grows stiff and silent. There's no shroud, no candle, just a rough blanket and a hurried grave beneath the sodden trees. Your sister clings to you, eyes wide and frightened. "Will you die too?" she whispers, voice small. You hold her tighter and promise you won't. You don't believe it, but she does. Children can still believe in impossible things. The grief lingers. For days, your family moves more slowly, words coming only when necessary, each of you lost in your own thoughts. The empty place at the hearth is a wound that doesn't heal. A strange rumour makes the rounds, perhaps a bit of dark humour, perhaps true. Someone claims you can feed the spirit of a loved one by leaving a bit of bread or milk at their grave. Some folks try it, but with so little to spare, most don't. Still, every time you pass the graveyard, you look for crusts or cups, half hoping, half afraid to find them. Historians still argue about the role of religion in these times. Did faith sustain people through the worst, or did it break under the weight of loss? Your own priest offers comfort, but his eyes are haunted. His sermons are shorter, quieter, more desperate. God's mercy is endless, he repeats, as if trying to convince himself. You listen, but the words wash over you, thin as the broth in your bowl. The house continues to shrink. Each loss makes the walls feel closer, the air heavier. You start to dread the evening, when shadows lengthen and memories grow sharper. Sometimes you lie awake and count the breaths of those around you, listening for that awful silence that means another soul has slipped away. You begin to measure your days in small mercies, a good night's sleep, a laugh from your sister, the warmth of the hearth, however feeble. You catch yourself praying for little things. Just let everyone make it through the night. Just one day without tears, just a little more food. Your prayers go unanswered, or so it feels, but you keep praying. It's all you have left. One day your father comes home with a look you don't recognize. Part relief, part shame. He's traded your grandmother's wedding brooch for a bag of meal. You eat that night, and it feels like a feast. You think about the brooch, the way the light caught on its worn gold, the stories it carried, and wonder if any memory is worth more than a full belly. You see the same story in every house, the youngest and oldest fading, families growing smaller, hearts hardening out of necessity. Some folks say you shouldn't mourn too much. It's God's will, they mutter. But you do mourn. You mourn for the stories lost, the songs unsung, the hands that once held yours so tight. A fringe tidbit floats around. In some places, folks believe the souls of the hungry dead return to walk the roads at night seeking scraps. Children are warned not to wander after dark. You're old enough not to believe, but still, you pull the covers up tight just in case. The world outside seems quieter too. Fewer voices, fewer footsteps. You watch as neighbours close their doors, drawing tight against grief and hunger. No one visits just to talk anymore. Every call is about survival. You realise how much you miss the casual comfort of other people, the easy laughter that once drifted through open windows. Sometimes you think about running away, striking out for a town where things might be better. But you look at your sister, your parents, the grave beneath the trees, and you stay. You tell yourself the rain will stop, that things will turn, that hope is just waiting to return. It's a thin hope, but it's yours. At night you lie awake, listening to the rhythm of your sister's breath. When she cries out in her sleep, you hold her close, whispering nonsense stories until she quiets. You promise her the spring will come, that there will be flowers and honey and bread. She believes you, and for a moment you almost believe yourself. The elders and the children leave you first, but their absence lingers. An ache, a lesson, a reason to hold on, if only for their sake. You wake each morning and count the living, holding them close in your memory, refusing to let the world grow any smaller than it already has. You never thought you'd grow used to the sound of hunger, but here you are, listening to the hollow groans of your own stomach, as if they're just another part of the weather. Evenings stretch out, long and thin, your mind drifting in and out of strange thoughts. Sometimes it's easier to pretend you're somewhere else, that you'll wake to a world full of bread and honey. But sooner or later, the rumble returns, and so does the world as it is. In the absence of food, the village fills itself with stories, rumours, tall tales, whispered warnings that pass from door to door with the stealth of a cold wind. Some stories are so outrageous you want to laugh. Others make you shudder even though you know better. The famine, it turns out, isn't just in your belly. It's in your head too, gnawing at reason and mercy. One rumour runs wild. A family on the far side of the woods has turned to theft, sneaking through the village by night, stealing anything that isn't locked or nailed down. Some say they're working with outlaws, others that they've become outlaws themselves, living on the edge of starvation and morality. You can't say you blame them, not really. If you had nothing left to lose, you might do the same. Theft becomes a shadow game, a desperate calculus played out in darkness. Doors that were never locked before now bristle with makeshift bolts, twisted rope, sharpened sticks, rusty iron. Neighbours peer at each other with narrowed eyes. Trust dissolves, replaced by suspicion. It only takes one loaf gone missing, one chicken lost, for a feud to erupt. Sometimes the fights spill into daylight, voices raised and fists clenched, but more often they simmer, slow and poisonous. Historians point out that during the famine, crime soared, not just in the cities, but in every tiny village and hamlet. Records speak of whole bands of hungry people turning to highway robbery, of mothers stealing to feed their children, of old grudges settled over empty larders. You remember when your neighbour's son was caught snatching a turnip. He got a beating, and his family vanished the next week, house left cold and empty. As days pass, the stories get darker. Someone claims a miller's wife was found boiling bones, and no one is sure whether they belong to a cow or something else. You try not to let your mind wander down those alleys, but hunger changes how you look at everything. Every scrap, every bone, every pot left unwatched is precious. A strange kind of humour grows up around it all. Grim, nervous, the sort that makes you laugh too hard and then feel guilty. If you see stew with no bones, ask what's in it, your uncle jokes. And everyone chuckles, but no one looks him in the eye. Another time your father tries to lighten the mood. In the old days, we threw the bones to the dogs. Now the dogs are throwing them to us. The laughter is real, if short-lived. But it's the cannibal tales that unsettle you most. They arrive like bad weather, slow at first, then all at once, everyone talking about them as if they're fact. The stories always happen somewhere else, of course, the next village over or a far-off country. A traveller claims he saw a woman feeding her children with meat she couldn't explain. Another swears he found a stew pot with a finger bone in it, white and unmistakable. Mainstream historians insist that, while cannibalism during the Great Famine was rare, there are enough scattered reports, enough terrified confessions, enough accusations, to suggest it happened in places where hope truly ran out. Some argue it's just rumour, hysteria fed by fear, but others point to parish records and court cases where the unthinkable became real. You don't want to believe it, but the fear lingers. One night, lying awake, you hear footsteps in the lane. You freeze, listening. The steps stop at your door. Your father rises silently, a stick in his hand, and you all hold your breath. After a long moment, the steps move on. In the morning, you find nothing missing, but the feeling of unease doesn't leave. You realise then how close the line between safety and chaos has become. One desperate act, one night of weakness, and everything could tip. In the days that follow, the tales grow stranger. People start to blame the famine on witches, foreigners, even the devil himself. You hear a wild story that the miller's daughter is cursed, born with a mark on her shoulder, the sign of a witch. Some folks say she's the reason the rain won't stop. Your mother shakes her head, muttering about ignorance, but you can see the worry in her eyes. When fear is hungry, it'll eat anything, even reason. Historians still debate the role of these wild stories. Did they help people cope, giving a shape to their fear? Or did they just make things worse, turning neighbour against neighbour? You hear of villages where strangers are turned away with stones and curses, where old women are hounded out for casting spells on the crops. It's safer, some say, to have a villain to blame than to accept a world that's simply unfair. A quirky tidbit passes through the village. Half joke, half warning. If you must steal, do it on a Sunday. The devil, after all, is too busy with the priest to watch you. No one laughs too hard, but more than one family quietly keeps their best food hidden on Saturday nights. You notice too that people start to look at each other differently, even friends, even family. You count the bread before and after every meal. Once, you catch your cousin slipping an extra piece into her pocket and you say nothing. The next day, you find your own share a little smaller. You wonder if she noticed or if she's just as hungry as you. Your mother tries to keep up the old routines. Prayers at dawn, sweeping the hearth, telling stories by the fire. But you can see the tension in her hands, the tightness in her voice. Even the smallest argument now feels like a threat. Your brother and sister snap at each other over the last carrot and you catch yourself thinking, if only we didn't have to share. Sometimes you wish you could close your eyes and wake in a world where all of this is a bad dream. But there's no waking from hunger, only the slow fading of hope. You start to notice the lines in your mother's face, the hollows in your father's cheeks. Everyone is shrinking, not just from hunger, but from fear. You find comfort where you can. A neighbour shares a cup of thin soup. Your father comes home with a handful of apples, somehow bartered for a broken comb. You make a game of counting seeds, of seeing who can hold out the longest before taking a bite. Even the smallest kindness feels like a miracle. A fringe tale spreads through the village. Some folks claim you can drive away hunger by sleeping with a piece of bread under your pillow. It draws out the hunger, they say, like a poultice draws out poison. You try it once, just for the hope, but all it does is make your dreams taste of stale crusts. The church is no refuge. The priest offers prayers, but even he seems thinner, his robes hanging loose, his voice weaker. You see him glance at the arm's chest, always empty now. The sermons turn darker, full of warnings about temptation, about the dangers of envy and theft. Despair is the devil's feast, he says, eyes scanning the pews. You listen, but you wonder if even he believes. One day you wake to a commotion. Voices raised, a crowd in the lane. You rush outside and find the blacksmith's house broken into, the pantry stripped bare. The blacksmith stands in the doorway, eyes wild. "Whoever took it, may God have mercy on you," he shouts, "because I will not." You know that look. It's the look of a man with nothing left to lose. You wonder sometimes how far you'd go. If your sister was starving, would you steal? Would you fight? The thought unsettles you because the answer isn't as clear as it once was. Historians still argue whether the stories of cannibalism and theft are exaggerations, symptoms of collective fear, or reflections of real events. Some say famine reveals the worst in people. Others insist it also draws out the best. You see both. One neighbour shares their last onion. Another locks their door tight and prays for rain. The tales never stop. They swirl around the village, growing wilder with each telling. A man is said to have eaten the bark from his roof beams. A woman boiled her wedding dress for the starch. Children hunt rats and crows, anything that might fill the emptiness. You try not to listen, but the stories find you anyway. A joke goes around. In the next life, may we all be cows. At least cows, you think, get put out of their misery quickly. Yet, for all the darkness, you cling to the small bright things. A smile from your father, the warmth of the fire, the sweetness of an apple slice. The world may be full of hunger, but it is not yet empty of kindness. One evening, as you gather with your family, you find yourself telling a story, not of famine, but of spring, of wildflowers and honey and sun on your face. Your sister listens, eyes wide, and for a moment you all remember what hope feels like. But when the story ends, the hunger is still there, and the tales of the night press in from every corner. You hold your family close and promise yourself that, no matter what happens, you will not let the darkness win. So you listen, you hope, you keep watch. You become an expert in rumour, in the way fear can spread and transform, in the power of stories to shape reality, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And each night, as you drift to sleep, you remind yourself, tomorrow there may be a story worth telling that's not about hunger, or fear, or loss. Tomorrow there may be something new. Until then, you hold on. You always hold on. The thing no one ever tells you about a famine is how it flattens everything. Houses, fields, faces, and finally hope itself. But perhaps the strangest part is watching power itself starve. When you were younger, you imagined the lords and ladies feasting behind thick walls, their tables groaning with roasted meats, pies, and jugs of sweet wine. Maybe once it was true, maybe not. It doesn't matter now. Hunger, it seems, is the one visitor nobody can keep out. You hear the rumours first. It's always rumours in these times. A peddler trudges through the mud, cloak battered, shoes in tatters, and whispers that even the Baron's stables are empty. The manor cook was seen weeping by the well, the silverware pawned in the next town for sacks of dried peas. At the edge of the village, a pair of liveried servants haggle over a sack of grain like common beggars. Once, their clothes would have inspired awe or envy. Now they're soiled and patched, proof that privilege is no shield against a world gone sideways. One evening, the village square erupts with excitement. The reeve is reading a royal decree. He stands on a crate, voice trembling, and unrolls a piece of parchment as rain trickles off his nose. By order of His Majesty, all grain stores shall be inventoried and distributed according to need. There's a moment of silence, broken only by a sarcastic cough. Everyone knows what this means. A new round of searching, counting, measuring, and at the end of it, not nearly enough food. Mainstream historians note that across Europe, kings and councils issued decree after decree, desperately trying to manage an unmanageable crisis. There were laws against hoarding, against profiteering, against eating certain foods. Bread was to be weighed, markets were to be watched. The lords posted soldiers by the mills, but it was like shouting at the wind. Hunger, you realise, doesn't care about laws. The village priest, gaunt as the rest, stands by the church door reading from a crumpled letter sent down from the bishop. Pray for rain to end, for the sun to return, for the mercy of God on all his children. You bow your head, but your mind wanders to the pitiful shriveled carrot in your pocket. Faith is a comfort, but it won't fill your belly. Your stomach rumbles and you hope no one notices. A fringe tidbit filters down from the manor. The Baron's falcons, once prized for their beauty and speed, have been released. No one had the heart or the appetite to eat them, but there was nothing left to feed them either. You imagine the birds soaring into the grey sky, searching for prey, not knowing their world has changed forever. If only we could all just fly away, your mother mutters, brushing rain from her brow. The decrees keep coming. One day, you're told to deliver a portion of whatever grain you might have to the manor. Another day, you're summoned to stand in the square while the bailiff counts heads, comparing names on a list to the shrinking crowd before him. If you have food, share it, he proclaims. But no one moves. No one can. There's nothing left to share. Historians still argue whether these measures helped or made things worse. Some say the efforts of kings and councils slowed the suffering. Others claim the endless rules only bred resentment, forcing desperate people into deeper secrecy and darker corners. In your experience, the result is always the same. More suspicion, more grumbling, more nights spent hiding what little you have from prying eyes. One evening, your father returns from the village meeting with a strange look on his face. He pulls you aside, voice low. They say the king's own table is bare. The court is sending for grain from distant lands, but the ships are lost or robbed or sunk. The city folk are rioting, the lords are eating weeds. He shakes his head. We're all the same now. Rich or poor, we're all hungry. The news should comfort you, but instead it leaves you uneasy. If even the mighty are brought low, what hope do the rest of you have? The stories you grew up with, the ones where the king brings justice, the priest brings comfort, The Lord brings bread in a hard year. Those stories feel thin and tattered now, as fragile as the skin over your knuckles. A new rumour drifts through. The Baron's daughter, always pale and sickly, has been sent away to a convent where the nuns claim to have enough beans to last until spring. Some folks grumble that the rich always find a way. Others snicker that even the convent kitchens are empty now, and that the nuns, for all their prayers, are just as thin as the rest. You begin to notice little signs of desperation in the faces of the important folk. The steward's cloak is ragged at the hem. The manor guards are seen foraging for berries on the common. The squire, once proud and quick to sneer, shuffles past your cottage with a sack of turnip greens head down. Mainstream historical fact. In some places, even monasteries and great houses ran out of food, forced to sell their treasures or dismiss their servants. Chroniclers of the time wrote of priests and monks begging for crusts from the very peasants they once taxed. You see the echo of this every time a cloaked figure from the manor visits your village, looking for charity. Sometimes you find yourself oddly pleased to see the high and mighty brought low. See if their prayers work any better than ours, your uncle quips. But the feeling never lasts long. You'd trade all the schadenfreude in the world for a full meal. A strange tidbit floats by one afternoon. Someone claims the king's astrologer has declared that the famine will end as soon as Venus rises in the house of the boar. No one knows what that means, but it becomes a running joke in the village. "How's your Venus today?" a neighbour calls across the lane. "Still not in the boar," you reply, trying to smile. The proclamations and inspections grow more frequent. The manor reeve goes door to door counting sacks of grain, jars of beans, even peeking into haylofts. You learn to hide food with the same skill you once used to hide sweets as a child, under floorboards behind loose stones, wrapped in old rags and tucked behind the firewood. Everyone is doing it. The only real crime now is being caught. One night, there's a commotion at the manor. Voices raised, a torchlit search of the grounds, angry shouts. In the morning you hear the news. Someone has stolen the last of the Lord's wine and the last fattened goose. No one is caught. Some say the thief was a servant. Others whisper it was the Baron himself, too proud to be seen begging for food. In famine, everyone is a suspect. Historians still debate whether these endless inspections and fair shares created more justice or simply deepened the sense of despair. Did people learn to share, or did they just learn to hide? You think you know the answer. These days, you trust no one with your secrets, not even your friends. A joke starts making the rounds. How do you tell a noble from a peasant? Count their bones. Laughter, when it comes, is quick and harsh, but it's something, at least. The church is caught in the same spiral. The priest pleads for mercy, for donations to the poor, but the poor have nothing to give. A group of desperate villagers tries to force the church to open its doors. There's a scuffle, a few shouts, but the priest insists there's nothing left inside. You believe him. You've seen the hollow look in his eyes. One Sunday, the bishop himself visits the village. A rare and sombre event. He arrives on foot, his robes patched, walking stick muddy, no entourage behind him. He offers blessings, but little else. You kneel in the rain, listening as he repeats the same prayers you've heard all year. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. The words hang in the air, thin and cold. Afterward, the bishop sits by the fire in your cottage, sipping weak broth, eyes closed. Faith, he whispers, is tested in famine. You watch him shiver and wonder how much faith he has left. A quirky detail. Someone swears the bishop tried to pay for his supper with a splinter of the true cross. Might fetch a loaf in the next village, your father jokes, and for once, even your mother smiles. You begin to understand, in a way you never did before, how little separates you from those in power. Everyone is afraid. Everyone is hungry. The old stories about nobles and priests being different start to feel like another kind of hunger, something made up to keep hope alive. As the rain continues, the village seems to sink even deeper into itself. No one talks about the future anymore. Even the dreams of a better spring feel dangerous, like tempting fate. You wake each day, count the crusts, say your prayers, and try to remember a time when the world felt safe. Still, there are small moments of defiance. A village boy throws mud at the manor gate. A group of mothers sneaks into the orchard at night, gathering the last windfall apples for their children. The old reeve, supposed to be counting every grain, slips a handful of dried peas into your mother's hand as he passes. "Don't tell the Baron," he whispers. Historians still debate whether such acts of quiet rebellion mattered. Some say they helped people survive. Others claim they changed nothing in the grand scheme. You don't care about the grand scheme. For you, every secret, every crumb, every moment of kindness is a reason to keep going. You watch as the world you knew, one of lords and peasants, prayers and proclamations, shrinks to a single question. How do we survive another day? You keep your head down, your secrets close, and hope, quietly, that you will outlast the rain. You wake one morning to find a strange ache in your bones, a heaviness in your chest that isn't just hunger. There's a sickly, sweet smell in the air, stale sweat, damp straw, sour breath. Your sister is feverish, her cheeks flushed, her hair stuck to her forehead. She shivers and sweats at the same time, clutching your hand so tightly you fear her thin fingers might snap. This is what no one tells you about famine. When the food runs out, sickness always follows. It creeps in slow at first. A cough here, a runny nose there. Then, suddenly it's everywhere. Someone is always coughing or groaning or shivering in their sleep. The air feels heavy with invisible dangers. Every touch is a risk. Every embrace, a gamble. Mainstream historians agree that during the Great Famine, disease stalked the land hand in hand with hunger. Bodies weakened by months of scant meals are easy prey for every passing illness. Chest colds, fevers, infections that never seem to heal. A scratch festers into an angry wound. A sneeze becomes a harbinger of something worse. The priest prays, but you know better now than to trust in prayer alone. Some mornings, you check the faces of your family before you say a word. Who is pale? Who is sweating? Who is too quiet? It becomes a ritual, this daily tally of the living, the ill, the nearly gone. Your mother tries to keep the sick apart from the rest, but the house is too small, the air too thick. The bedsheets are always damp, never quite clean. A joke makes the rounds. At least in winter you can blame the chills on the weather. No one really laughs. You watch helplessly as your sister's fever burns. Your mother tries every old remedy she knows. Sage boiled in water, a rag soaked in vinegar pressed to the brow, prayers murmured over a cup of weak tea. Sometimes she sends you out to search for herbs, anything green, anything hopeful. You trudge through the mud, pockets empty, heart heavy, eyes sharp for even the faintest sign of a healing plant. Sometimes you find what you seek: dandelion leaves, bitter and sharp, yarrow, rumoured to stop bleeding, plantain for bruises. Most times, you return empty-handed, muttering apologies as you close the door behind you. Your mother only nods, lips pressed tight, eyes fixed on your sister's trembling form. Historians still debate the effectiveness of medieval medicine. Was it superstition, or was there some wisdom buried in the rituals and herbs? You want to believe there's hope in the old ways, that somewhere in the stories and the leaves lies a cure for the sickness that eats at your family. But belief is a fragile thing, easily shattered by a single night's fever. A quirky tidbit surfaces in the village. Someone claims a clove of garlic tied around the neck will ward off illness. You try it. The smell is strong, sharp enough to sting your eyes, but your sister only smiles weakly and tells you she feels safer. Your brother ties a scrap of red cloth around his wrist for luck. You pin your hopes on both, herbs and colour, and the memory of days when protection felt possible. Disease works fast. One day you're laughing at a joke by the hearth, the next you're watching someone shiver, teeth chattering, unable to swallow even a mouthful of broth. The priest comes to bless the sick, but his prayers are short, his eyes tired. You notice how careful he is not to touch anyone, how quickly he leaves the house. Later you hear he's fallen ill himself. and you wonder who will pray for him. You learn to recognise the signs: grey skin, shallow breaths, a look in the eyes that says, "I'm tired." You wonder what it would feel like to rest, truly rest. But the idea is as distant as spring. Some nights you hear coughing from every corner of the village. The sound travels through thin walls across muddy lanes mixing with the wind. You count the seconds between coughs, listening for the sudden awful silence that means it's over. A rumour spreads that a travelling healer has come to the next town over, selling a potion that guarantees health and strength. You don't believe it, but a neighbour spends their last coin anyway. The next week the healer is gone, the illness remains, and your neighbour is a little poorer, a little weaker, a little more desperate. Mainstream historians point to a spike in quacks and charlatans during the famine. Miracle cures spring up like weeds: tinctures of toad, powder of bone, potions coloured with berries and cheap wine. Some even try bloodletting, hoping to draw the bad humours from the sick. Your mother won't hear of it, but you know some neighbours have tried. You see the marks on their arms, the hollow look in their eyes. A quirky superstition grows. Some folks sleep with their heads at the foot of the bed, convinced it will confuse the sickness. Others hang horsehair above the door to catch bad spirits. You try them all, because at this point nothing feels too strange to try. Sometimes you wonder if the illness is more than just a physical thing. A sadness that seeps into the bones, an exhaustion too heavy to shake. Your father, once so full of stories and plans, now sits silent by the hearth, eyes fixed on the embers, fingers twisted in his lap. When he does speak, it's only to ask for water or to whisper your mother's name. The village changes. The sick houses are marked with a scrap of cloth, a signal to stay away. The market grows quieter, fewer voices, fewer bargains. The miller closes up shop. The blacksmith is never seen outside. At night the lanes are empty, but for the distant wails of those who can't find rest. Historians still debate how much of the devastation was due to hunger, how much to disease. Did illness strike hardest at the weakest, or did it sweep through strong and weak alike? You watch as both children and adults fall, and you stop looking for patterns. There's no sense to it, no fairness. You take on more chores: fetching water, gathering sticks, tending the fire, sitting beside the sick, holding hands, telling stories, singing lullabies. Your mother says you have a gift for comfort, but you'd trade all the comfort in the world for a single loaf of bread a day without worry. You notice too how grief begins to look like illness. Sunken cheeks, dull eyes, a reluctance to rise from bed. Is it fever or sorrow? Sometimes you can't tell the difference. A rumour says the old herbalist knows a secret cure, but when you visit her hut at the edge of the woods, you find her as thin and pale as everyone else. She gives you a bundle of dried herbs, tells you to steep them in water, to pray for healing. Sometimes, she says, voice barely above a whisper, the body must rest before the heart can heal. You nod, because you want to believe her. You want to believe something. A joke lingers in your mind. If we make it through this winter, we'll be too thin for the next one to catch us. You tell it to your brother, and for a moment, you both laugh. A real laugh, one that feels almost normal. As the days stretch on, you grow skilled at the small rituals of care. Sponging fevered brows, whispering encouragement, hiding your own fear behind a steady smile. Your sister's fever breaks one morning, and you all weep with relief. But there's no time to celebrate. Another cough starts up in the corner, another shadow passes across the firelight. The world shrinks again. You mark your days by who is sick and who is well. Meals become even smaller if that's possible. Sleep is lighter, interrupted by coughing, by nightmares, by the constant worry that you'll wake to another loss. Historians still argue whether faith helped or hindered. Did prayers bring hope, or did they breed resignation? You pray because it's what you've always done, but the words feel thinner now, worn by repetition and doubt. A strange comfort emerges from shared suffering. You know which neighbours will lend a hand, which will leave a loaf on your step, which will look away. You become part of a quiet network of care, Small kindnesses traded back and forth, a nod here, a gentle word there. Your dreams are crowded with images. Fields bursting with grain, a table piled with food, laughter ringing out beneath blue skies. You wake with your mouth watering, heart pounding, and for a moment you're certain things will get better. But then you rise, fetch water, check on the sick, count the crusts, and the world feels as grey and heavy as ever. Still, you carry on because there is nothing else to do. At night, you listen to the wind, the rain, the distant coughs, and you whisper promises to yourself and your family. Spring will come, the rains will end, the sickness will pass. And somehow in that whispered hope, you find the strength to face another day. The worst thing about endless hunger is not just what it does to your body, but what it does to your mind and to the minds of everyone around you. You used to find comfort in faith. You remember kneeling beside your mother in church, the safe candlelit hush of prayers rising together, the promise that God would provide. Now the church feels different, more echo than comfort, more shadow than sanctuary. The rows are thin. People sit with their heads in their hands, mumbling not just prayers but bargains and confessions and desperate wishes. You catch yourself bargaining too. If you could just get one proper meal, you promise you'll be better, kinder, more grateful. Sometimes you imagine trading away years of your life for a night without hunger. But hunger isn't listening. Priests wander from house to house with weary steps, doling out blessings and relics. Splinters of old bones, scraps of cloth from a saint's robe, a chipped wooden cross said to have touched the hem of Mary herself. They offer prayers for rain to stop, for bread to return, for the sick to recover. You accept these tokens with polite nods, but the rituals feel thin. The holy water tastes stale. You wonder if God is as hungry as you are. Mainstream historians say that during the Great Famine, faith itself frayed. Attendance dropped, offerings dwindled, and priests sometimes found themselves just as desperate as their flock. There are stories of holy men giving away their last loaf, and others of priests hoarding grain and being driven from their churches. You wonder which kind you have. The priest in your village means well, but even he seems worn down by it all. His vestments hang loose, his face gaunt, eyes shadowed by too many sleepless nights. He stands at the altar, voice hoarse, and asks the congregation to pray harder, to give more, to believe. Some people listen, eyes shining with desperate hope. Others fidget, staring at the floor, lips tight. A strange tide of healers, quacks and self-proclaimed wise folk flows through the countryside, filling the gap left by faltering faith. They sell cures and spells, potions made of moss and wine, bags of dried rat tails, stones blessed by moonlight. Some are charlatans, no better than thieves. Others are simply desperate, clinging to rituals as a last defense against a world that no longer makes sense. A quirky tidbit spreads. Some villagers start boiling their coins with herbs, convinced the spirit of silver will purify their water or bring luck. You watch as your neighbour tosses his last penny into a pot, stirring and muttering. He swears the taste is different, a little less bitter. Maybe hope itself is an ingredient. Historians still debate whether these strange cures and rituals were a sign of superstition run wild, or a natural human response to living through the unimaginable. When nothing else works, why not try everything, you hear someone say. You nod, though your faith, such as it is, has grown thin. A new prayer circulates, written by a wandering friar. God, if you cannot feed us, at least let us sleep without dreams of food. It's a small comfort. Some nights you recite it under your breath, half hoping for a miracle, half just trying to quiet your rumbling stomach. The old ways clash with the new. The village herbalist claims her nettle soup cures starving sickness, while the priest insists only the sacraments can save the soul. One day, the two stand in the square, voices raised, each accusing the other of leading people astray. You watch, not knowing whom to trust, wishing someone could just hand you a loaf of bread and end the argument. The line between faith and fear blurs. Some villagers begin to suspect that the famine is a punishment. They talk of sins, real or imagined, whispering names, tallying up wrongs. God is testing us, your mother says, or punishing us, your father adds. Or maybe he's just forgotten, your sister mutters, then covers her mouth, eyes wide. You all fall silent, listening for the crack of thunder that never comes. Mainstream historical fact. Europe during the famine was awash in pilgrimages, processions, and desperate acts of piety. People walked barefoot for miles, flagellated themselves in public squares, built new shrines. But still, the rain kept falling, and the hunger didn't end. Faith, you realise, is sometimes as thin as your next meal. A wild rumour starts. Someone in the next village claims to have found a breadstone, a rock that, when placed under a pillow, brings dreams of eating and a full stomach in the morning. Soon, every child is searching the lanes for such a stone. You find one yourself, smooth and pale, and slip it under your pillow. Your dreams are strange that night. A table piled high with cakes and cheese, a river of sweet wine, and then, suddenly, rain washing it all away. You wake hungry as ever, but for a moment the memory of sweetness lingers. You notice too that every gathering becomes a place for trading cures and warnings. In the market, an old woman swears that wrapping bread in nettles keeps it from moulding. A wandering friar says rubbing salt on your eyelids keeps you from seeing hunger demons at night. Some people snicker, but no one is laughing when a child's fever breaks, or when bread really does stay fresh an extra day. Historians still argue whether these homegrown rituals did any harm or good. Some say they distracted from real help. Others say they gave hope where hope was needed most. You think about the time you watched your mother bless the last crust of bread before giving it to your sister. She knew it wouldn't be enough, but she did it anyway. The tension between priest and healer grows. One Sunday, after Mass, the priest stands outside the church, refusing to let the herbalist bless the congregation's food. Witchcraft, he calls it. She glares, and the villagers look between them torn. Afterward, you see people sneaking into her hut, clutching bundles of dried leaves and whispered prayers. Later that week, the priest falls ill. Some call it coincidence, others say it's a sign. Your own beliefs shift with the wind. Some nights, you pray the old prayers. Others, you tie a thread around your wrist, rub garlic on your feet, leave a cup of water by the window for the wandering spirits. You're not sure what works, but you'll try anything. A dark joke. What do you get when you mix a priest, a healer, and a hungry villager? 3 empty stomachs and a pocket full of nettles. You tell it to your brother, and he snorts, then sighs. The endless rain blurs days into weeks. The church roof leaks, the altar cloths mould. The priest preaches on Noah, on storms and survival, on God's tests. But as you kneel on the cold floor, you wonder if even Noah would survive this flood of hunger. People begin to invent saints of their own. St. Elsbeth of the empty pot, St. Gregory the rainstopper, St. Felice of the breadcrumb. Their stories are silly, made up by children and passed around the hearth, but they bring smiles and sometimes a flicker of hope. One night your mother tells you to place your shoes upside down so luck won't run out. Your father laughs, then does the same. Even when the world is crumbling, rituals hold you together. Historians still debate whether the faith that survived the famine was the same as before. Some say it became harder, sharper, more desperate. Others say it grew softer, more private, rooted in the little kindnesses people could offer each other. The church bells ring less often now. When they do, it's usually for a funeral, or a rain-soaked prayer for mercy. Still, you listen. The sound, muffled by the mist, is a thread tying you to the world outside your door. You come to realize that faith, in God, in luck, in each other, is not about answers, but about endurance. The courage to whisper one more prayer, to try one more cure, to believe that the world will turn again, even as the rain keeps falling. You press your palm to the church wall, its stones cool and rough beneath your fingers, and hope that something, anything, will answer. And when you return home, you look at your family and say a blessing over the empty table. just in case the old ways still hold some magic, just in case. By late summer, you no longer have to imagine what emptiness feels like. It becomes the world you wake into each day. The village that once seemed too small, where everyone knew your business and every path was well trodden, now yawns with silence. Houses stand with their doors ajar, windows gaping dark. The gardens run to weeds, the lanes to mud, and the absence of laughter is as heavy as hunger. You walk past houses where children once played. Now you see only a rag doll lying face down in the weeds, a tattered shawl blowing from a fence post, as if the family inside simply vanished one night, leaving the ghosts of everyday life behind. Sometimes you pause and listen, hoping for the clatter of pots or the soft buzz of voices. More often, there's nothing but the wind and the echo of your own footsteps. It's not just your own village. Everywhere you go, it's the same. Neighbours you've known since childhood have disappeared. Some slip away quietly in the night, bundled against the rain, faces pinched with fear and hope. Others leave without even a farewell, the knowledge of their going marked only by the shuttered window, the trampled grass at the edge of the lane. You wonder where they go. Most never return. Mainstream historians estimate that during the famine years, whole regions lost up to a quarter of their population. Some died, some fled, some simply faded into the mists of history. Parish registers stop, families disappear from the records, villages are left to rot. The living do not mourn too loudly. You cannot eat grief, and every tear is another weight on a weary heart. One morning you find yourself alone on the green, the dew thick, the grass tall. You can't remember the last time you saw the shoemaker's family, or the old widow who used to sit by her door, knitting and humming. You think about knocking to check, but something holds you back. You're afraid of what you'll find, or perhaps you're afraid of finding nothing at all. You learn to spot the signs of abandonment. The doors left swinging in the wind, the pot overturned in the hearth, a garden overgrown with brambles. Sometimes you enter these houses looking for anything that might help, a forgotten onion, a handful of beans, a scrap of wool. You try not to feel like a thief. Hunger makes everyone into something new. The rumour goes around that in some places whole villages have emptied, the land returned to the wild. A hunter swears he saw wolves moving through an abandoned hamlet, the animals as startled by silence as by the scent of man. You find yourself glancing over your shoulder when you fetch water, listening for sounds that don't belong. The line between wild and tamed grows thinner with every passing week. A quirky tidbit, one that makes its way down from distant counties. There are tales of village ghosts, not real spectres, but people who return to their empty homes at night, scavenge a meal, and vanish before dawn. Some say they leave signs, a door closed, a stone turned, a single daisy left on a windowsill. You don't know if you believe it, but you find yourself watching for those little clues, half hoping to see a sign that someone is still alive. Historians still argue whether these abandoned places ever truly died. Some say the land always comes back, new families arrive, fields are cleared, laughter returns. Others claim some villages are lost forever, their names wiped from memory, their stories ending in silence. You wonder which fate awaits your home. As more people vanish, your world shrinks. The market grows smaller, sometimes only one or two vendors brave enough to set out their wares, a scattering of customers picking over wilted greens and bruised apples. There are days when you recognise no one in the square, the faces all strangers, eyes flickering with fear. You feel the loss most keenly at night, when the lamps are few and the shadows gather thick. You used to hear voices drifting from one cottage to the next, someone singing, a baby's cry, laughter spilling over a game of dice. Now there's only the snap of the fire and the restless shuffle of feet. You find yourself humming under your breath, filling the quiet so it doesn't swallow you whole. Your family clings tighter to each other. The stories you share grow more precious, each memory a little fire against the dark. Your mother tells tales of neighbours who left for a better life, and you nod, even if you don't believe it. It's easier to imagine them somewhere safe, somewhere dry and full, than to admit what you know in your heart. A strange thing happens when people leave. The spaces they held seem to linger, as if the air itself remembers them. You catch yourself reaching for an extra bowl at supper, setting aside a stool for someone who isn't coming. Old habits die hard. Sometimes you dream of those who are gone. They walk with you down familiar paths, gather by the hearth, share in meals you haven't had in years. You wake comforted and aching, the loss sharper for having touched hope. You notice changes in the land too. The fields, once striped with careful rows, go ragged. Fruit trees drop their bounty to rot. The wild creeps in, foxglove and nettle, bramble and fern, softening the edges of everything you once thought permanent. The air smells different, less of smoke and bread, more of rain and green and distant earth. Historians note that after the famine, many villages never returned to what they were. Sometimes a few stubborn souls held on, sometimes new families arrived to carve out a life from the ruins. Other times, the old places simply slipped away, their stories swallowed by weeds and time. A fringe tale goes around, whispered by children and repeated by grown folk with nervous laughs. It's bad luck to look too closely in abandoned houses, lest you bring the silence home with you. You try not to believe it, but still you move quietly, careful not to disturb the dust or the dreams that linger in empty rooms. You take to marking time by the people who are left. The baker, always cheerful, is suddenly gone. The blacksmith, gruff and steady, packs up one evening without a word. The old couple at the edge of the village leave a sign on their door, "Gone south. May we meet again." Your world contracts, each loss a hole you cannot fill. Still, there are stubborn holdouts. The midwife, with her fierce eyes and quick hands, stays put, caring for the sick and helping the living hold on. Your own family too refuses to leave, clinging to the scraps of home and hope. Sometimes you think this is bravery, sometimes foolishness. But leaving feels like another kind of death. You learn to be grateful for small mercies. A neighbour who still waves, a voice in the distance, a loaf shared when no one is watching. The bonds that remain grow stronger, woven from shared loss and stubborn endurance. Mainstream historians point out that, in the wake of the famine, communities that survived were often those where people helped each other, where a sense of kin and neighbour ran deepest. You see this in your own life. The few who are left share what little they have: food, comfort, news of the world outside. A loaf of bread is a feast. A smile is as precious as gold. A new routine settles over the village. You and the other children, what few are left, take turns checking on the empty houses, watching for signs of life or danger. Sometimes you find a message scratched on a door, a mark left in the dust, a prayer carved into a beam. Each sign is a reminder that someone was here, someone struggled, someone hoped. You start to imagine the village as a kind of living thing, breathing with loss and longing. Every abandoned cottage is a scar, every weed-choked path a memory. But there is life still in the stubborn flowers that bloom by the road, in the birds that nest in empty eaves, in the hands that reach out again and again to hold what remains. As autumn deepens, you find yourself hoping for just one good harvest, 1 year when the rains hold off and the sun returns. You picture the village green crowded again, music in the air, the lost ones drifting home on the wind. Maybe it's a dream, but it's one you need. You gather the living close each night, grateful for every breath, every story shared in the dark. The world is quieter now, but not empty. As long as you remember the names of the missing, as long as you hold the hope of their return, the village endures. And so you wake each morning to silence, and you carry on. You didn't notice the forest creeping in at first. You were too busy watching the clouds and counting loaves, mindful of hunger and loss. But nature is patient. It waits for quiet, for empty houses, for fields left unploughed. By the time you do notice, it's everywhere. Green spilling over broken fences, nettles curling up through garden paths, brambles swallowing old walls. At night, you hear sounds you'd nearly forgotten, the hoot of owls, the scratch of foxes in the underbrush. the distant, uneasy howls of wolves threading through the rain. It's strange how quickly things change. Last summer, your days were full of the work of holding nature back, chopping, digging, tending, keeping the wild at bay. Now, the wild returns with a vengeance. Each empty cottage is a gift to weeds and creeping vines. You watch grass push up between cobblestones, ivy climb the sides of the old mill, thistles burst through what used to be the churchyard gate. The land reclaims what's been lost. Sometimes you think the earth was just waiting for its chance. Historians say that, after the famine, many fields across Europe went fallow. The people were too few, too weak to plant or reap. Forests returned. Old pastures vanished under hazel and oak. Wolves and wild boar, driven back for generations, crept in along empty tracks. Some chroniclers write of whole parishes swallowed by green. It's not just your village, you remind yourself. It's happening everywhere. At first, you're wary of these changes. You scan the fields for wolf tracks, count your chickens every morning, shut the door tight at dusk. There are tales, true or not, of wolves dragging away stray lambs, of wild dogs forming packs and raiding for scraps. Your father keeps his knife close at hand when he checks the traps, eyes wary for a flash of yellow in the shadows. Once, you spot a roe deer grazing at the edge of the garden, so bold it barely looks up as you pass. The wild offers its own gifts if you know how to look. You find mushrooms springing up in the ruins of the barn, blackberries fattening on forgotten canes, wild garlic pushing through the muddy banks by the river. Sometimes you and your sister gather wild strawberries in the overgrown orchard, hands stained red, bellies full for the first time in weeks. The taste is sweeter for being unexpected. A quirky tidbit you hear from a passing tinker. Some villages have started training dogs not to herd sheep but to chase off wolves. The old ways are gone, he laughs, tossing a stick to his shaggy mutt. These days you need a dog with more bite than bark. Sounds like a joke, but you believe him. One night you hear a scuffle behind the mill and find only paw prints and feathers left in the mud. Historians still argue whether nature's return was a blessing or a curse. Some say the wild brought new food, new life. Others claim it was a sign of how much had been lost. You see both sides. The woods offer berries and game, but also hide dangers. Roots that trip, brambles that tear, animals that hunt by night. Still, you'd rather face a hungry wolf than a hungry winter. You start to see the forest differently, not just as a threat, but as something alive, something ancient. Your grandmother used to tell stories about spirits in the trees, witches who rode on foxes, green men who watched over lost travellers. Those stories feel closer now, as if the thinning of people has thickened the presence of old magic. Some nights, the mist gathers in the hollows, and you swear you see shapes moving, figures that vanish if you look too long. One morning you follow your brother into the woods, baskets slung over your arms, hearts beating fast with excitement and fear. You gather nuts and wild apples, find a patch of sorrel for soup. You both freeze when you hear a branch snap nearby. For a moment you're certain it's a wolf, but it's only a badger lumbering through the leaf litter, more startled than you are. You bring home your treasures, berries, mushrooms, a sprig of thyme, and your mother smiles for the first time in days. The land gives back what it takes, she says softly, if we listen. You want to believe it, even as you wrap an extra layer of wool around your shoulders at night and push the dresser against the door just in case. The village changes too. With fewer people, there's less noise, less firelight to chase the dark. On moonless nights, the woods press in close. The only light, the soft shimmer of foxfire on old logs, the pale glow of fungus in the cracks of abandoned cottages. Your sister is convinced that the wild things are watching, waiting for their chance to reclaim what's theirs. You don't argue. You feel it too sometimes. The eyes in the dark, the sense of being both trespasser and guest in your own home. You start to see the beauty in it. The way the dawn light shines through dew-spun webs, the scent of rain on wild mint, the hush that settles over the fields at dusk. Sometimes, when the hunger isn't too sharp, you let yourself be lulled by it, drifting half asleep under the trees, listening to the world breathe. But the wild is not always gentle. You hear more stories of animals attacking livestock, of children chased by wild dogs, of fields trampled by rooting boar. The village bands together to keep watch at night, torches and sticks in hand, but it feels like a losing battle. There are simply too few of you, and too many ways for the wild to slip through. A joke makes the rounds. At least the wolves eat better than we do. It's not really funny, but you laugh anyway. Laughter, like bread, is best shared while you can. Historians point out that as villages emptied and fields lay fallow, forests spread more quickly than anyone expected. Land that had been cleared over generations vanished under green in a matter of years. Some scholars argue that these changes set the stage for a richer, wilder Europe in centuries to come. Others mourn the loss of hard-won farmland, the fading of human voices. You find yourself walking further into the woods with each passing week. At first, it's a matter of survival, looking for something to eat, something to trade, but over time it becomes something more. The forest is quiet, alive in a way the village no longer is. You start to learn the patterns of birds, the trails of deer, the safe places to gather and the places to avoid. You feel your senses sharpen, your fears shift. A quirky detail. One of the old men claims he saw a lynx near the river, a creature not seen in these parts for 100 years. The story travels fast, growing wilder with each telling. Soon, children whisper about bears, giant stags, even dragons waking in the hills. You shake your head but keep an eye out anyway. The seasons pass and the wild claims more ground. Old hedges disappear beneath hawthorn and rose. The river runs wilder, banks choked with alder and willow. The air smells different, sharp and green in spring, sweet and heavy in autumn. You get used to the calls of owls at night, the rustle of small animals in the hayloft. Some nights you dream of being swallowed by the forest, of branches curling around your bed, roots threading through your hair, moss growing over your hands. You wake to the sound of wolves, far away but getting closer. You shiver, pull the blankets tighter, and remind yourself you are not alone. Mainstream historical fact. Centuries later, forests still bear the scars of the famine years. Patches of old growth where fields were abandoned. Stories told in the rings of ancient oaks. The land forgets nothing, even when people do. You learn to balance fear with wonder. The wild is dangerous, yes, but it's also a gift. A reminder that life persists, even in the emptiest of places. You find peace in small things. A fox sunning itself on a stone, a hawk circling overhead, a wild rose blooming where the baker's garden used to be. Your village is smaller now, quieter, but not dead. You gather with the others at the edge of the green, sharing stories of what you've seen, what you've found. Sometimes someone tells a story of wolves or wild men and everyone shivers. Sometimes you share berries and laughter, and for a moment the world feels almost whole. The wild has come back, and with it, a kind of hope. If the land can recover, maybe you can too. Maybe loss is not the end, but a turning. You walk home through the twilight, wolves howling behind you, the smell of earth and green heavy in the air. You open your door and step inside, grateful for warmth, for family, for the fragile safety of home. You do not fear the wild, not as you once did. You know now that everything lost can be found again, if you look with open eyes. When the world goes wrong for this long, people stop searching for answers and start searching for someone to blame. The rains fall, the crops rot, and the hunger gnaws, but anger, at least, is easier to feed than a starving family. It begins as whispers. You hear them as you walk to fetch water or wait in line for the baker's last handful of flour. Why is this happening to us? Who brought this curse? Who's to blame for all we've lost? You see it in the way neighbours glance at each other, quick sideways looks, wary and sharp. A broken window, a sick child, a cow lost to wolves. Any small misfortune can start the old machine of suspicion whirring. You remember when these were just stories told on long winter nights, tales of witches, poisoners, cursed fields. Now, with every mouth hungry and every cupboard bare, those stories walk in daylight. The first accusations are quiet, veiled in rumour. The old woman who lives at the edge of the wood, always gathering herbs, always mumbling to herself, becomes the subject of pointed glances. The peddler with foreign coins, the boy born with a birthmark, the family who's managed to keep a few chickens alive when others have not, all become suspects. Survival itself becomes suspicious. Mainstream historians agree, famine years in Europe always brought waves of witch hunts, scapegoating, and wild, desperate explanations. People who might once have been pitied or ignored are now seen as threats. When suffering becomes unexplainable, blame fills the void. You hear the rumours swirl. Did you see the cat she keeps? She talks to the crows. They say her bread never moulds, even in this damp. You watch the accused shrink into themselves, moving quickly, heads down. You want to defend them, to shout that hunger is no one's fault. But the words stick in your throat, heavy as a stone. A quirky tidbit. Children, always quick to spot a difference, invent new games. Witch or not, they chant, chasing each other around the green. Sometimes they pick a girl or boy to stand trial, chanting nonsense accusations until someone breaks into giggles or tears. You laugh along at first, but the fun curdles quickly. One afternoon, you see the old woman's granddaughter hiding behind a shed, her cheeks wet, the laughter ringing in her ears. The church tries to help, preaching patience and faith, but even the priest's words have lost their certainty. He reminds the village that God tests his people, that patience is a virtue, that the devil is a liar. Still, you see the worry in his eyes when he looks at the shrinking congregation, at the crosses carved into doorframes, at the crude talismans people now hang over their beds. The market is a tense place. Every spoiled egg, every loaf that goes mouldy too quickly sparks muttering. Who cursed this? Someone demands, holding up a misshapen carrot. Whose field was this grown in? The vendors try to calm tempers, but every transaction is fraught. No one wants to be cheated, but everyone fears being accused. Sometimes you're swept up in it yourself. You find a rash on your arm, and your mother dabs it with garlic and mutters a half-remembered charm. Just in case, she says, eyes darting toward the window. You want to roll your eyes, but instead you say the words with her. In times like these, even skeptics hedge their bets. A new superstition emerges. You must never speak ill of anyone after sunset, or your words might grow teeth. Someone claims to have seen the baker's cat speaking with a fox. A sickle goes missing, and a girl with a bad eye is blamed. You wonder how many of these little storms would have blown over if only the rain would stop. Historians still debate whether scapegoating and witch hunts made the famine worse, or simply gave people something to do, a way to vent helplessness and fear. Some say these rituals bonded communities, others claim they tore them apart forever. In your village, it feels like both at once. You're all in it together until suddenly you're not. The first public accusation comes when a cow drops dead, its eyes cloudy, tongue blue. The owner blames his neighbour, claiming she cast a spell. A crowd gathers. The accused sobs, swears she's innocent, but the mood is ugly. Someone finds a twisted root, says it's a witch's charm. Others call for calm, but the anger is contagious. That night, the neighbour's windows are smashed. She flees to the woods and is not seen again. You feel sick watching it happen. The village is smaller now, every absence a wound. But the fear is bigger than any wound. It spreads, quick as fever, burning up compassion and reason. You cling tighter to your family, grateful for every ordinary day, every unremarkable meal. Some neighbours turn inward, avoiding eye contact, speaking only in whispers. Others get louder, more insistent, as if volume could protect them from accusation. The bravest among you try to speak reason, but the hungry do not want reason. They want relief, and failing that, a target. A strange rumour spreads. A witch cake made from rye flour and hair, baked to reveal the guilty party when placed before a fire. Children dare each other to try it. Adults mutter about old pagan ways returning. One day, you see smoke rising from a distant chimney and wonder what's being conjured in the name of justice. A dark joke makes the rounds. If you can't find a witch, make one. It's a bitter laugh, a warning and a confession. You think of all the people who have vanished, their names no longer spoken, their absence explained away by suspicion. You hope you're never desperate enough to point a finger just to save yourself. Mainstream historical fact: after the worst years, court records show a rise in witch trials and executions across famine-struck Europe. The violence often came after the hunger, when fear and anger had nowhere else to go. Sometimes whole families were driven out or destroyed on nothing more than rumour. You see the legacy of it in your own life. The village is tense, nerves frayed raw. People gather in smaller groups, trust fewer friends. Old alliances crumble, new grudges bloom. You miss the old days, when an argument was just a quarrel, not a threat. You miss believing in a world where bad luck was just luck. You and your siblings invent rituals of your own, ways to keep fear at bay. You touch wood before leaving the house, say a rhyme before meals, leave a stone on the window ledge for protection. You're not sure you believe any of it, but you do it anyway. If it keeps you safe, or just feeling safer, it's worth the trouble. Sometimes the anger turns inward. Families argue, tempers flare. You fight with your brother over a piece of stale bread and say things you regret. Later, you apologise, share the last crust, promise not to let the darkness win. But it's a daily battle. A fringe tale. Some villages hold secret cleansing rituals, burning old clothes, casting trinkets into the river, hoping to wash away whatever curse has settled over them. You hear of one hamlet where they chased the famine out with pots and pans, banging and shouting until their throats were raw. Did it work? No one knows, but they tried, and sometimes that's all you can do. The priest preaches forgiveness, but forgiveness is harder to find when every day is a fight for survival. Still, you try. When your neighbour's bread goes mouldy, you offer a kind word. When a friend loses a chicken, you help search. If only to prove you're not the thief. You realise in quiet moments that everyone is carrying something heavy. Grief, guilt, fear. These are not so different from hunger. You forgive more even when you're not asked. It's a way of keeping your soul from shrivelling, a way to remember you're still human. As autumn turns to winter, the mood in the village grows softer in a way, exhaustion overtaking anger. The worst has happened. The blaming slows. You learn to live with uncertainty, to find peace where you can. You remember those who vanished not just as scapegoats, but as people, neighbours, friends, family. You keep their memory alive, refusing to let the stories end in suspicion. And in the quiet that follows, you find the first faint stirrings of hope. The world has not ended. The rains may stop. The hunger may fade. What remains is you, your family, your village, battered but not broken, learning once more how to trust. You breathe deep, say a prayer, and promise yourself to meet fear with kindness whenever you can. You will not let hunger make you into someone else's shadow. You almost don't believe it at first, a trick of the mind, a wishful thought. But one morning you wake and the air feels different, softer. The rain has stopped. For the first time in memory, a shaft of sunlight slices through the window, drawing a golden line across the rough boards of your floor. You blink in surprise, certain it will vanish, but it holds. There's no grand announcement, no village bell, no burst of celebration. Recovery, it turns out, begins with a whisper, not a shout. It's the absence of rain, the slow drying of the mud, the way the wind smells faintly of green rather than rot. You walk outside and for the first time in ages you see neighbours out too, blinking, squinting, faces upturned as if the sun might burn. Some laugh, some weep, most just stand there, feeling the moment. Mainstream historians note that after years of deluge, the weather finally turned. The relentless rains eased. Across Europe, people crawled from their shelters and found the world changed, but not destroyed. Fields, once drowned, began to dry. The soil was poor, thin, choked with weeds, but the promise of planting returned. The earth was battered, but not barren. You see it in small ways first. Puddles shrinking, moss fading from the stones, paths hardening underfoot. Your father runs a hand over the rough field behind your cottage, lips pressed tight, eyes shining with something you haven't seen in a long time. It's not much, he says, but it's a start. Your mother digs her fingers into the dirt, turning it over, looking for life. She finds a worm, thin, pale, but moving. She smiles. A quirky tidbit travels through the village, a game children play with the first sunshine, hopping from patch to patch, pretending the grass is gold and the mud is lava. They shout and skip, laughing in ragged voices, their shadows flickering over the ground. You join them for a moment, letting yourself forget, letting yourself believe in joy again. The hunger is still there, but now it sits alongside hope. The days are longer, and you work them hard. The village bands together to clear the ruined fields, haul away the debris, patch up roofs and fences. Every hand is needed, even the smallest. You dig and rake, shoulders aching, but the pain is good. It means you're alive. It means there's something worth fighting for. Historians still argue about how recovery truly began. Was it luck? Climate? The stubbornness of people who refused to surrender? Some say new farming methods helped. Others credit the simple return of good weather. You don't care about the reason. All that matters is that something is changing, that the nightmare isn't endless. You notice small mercies everywhere. The hens start to lay again. A single egg, then two. The old apple tree puts out a handful of blossoms, white and pink, delicate as lace. A neighbour returns from the woods with a clutch of wild mushrooms. You trade a bit of old cloth for a pouch of barley seed. You feel hope rise in you, fragile but stubborn. Your mother starts saving things again. Tiny bits of string, seeds from every fruit, bones for the soup pot. Waste nothing, she says. The good times are not yet here. But you notice she hums as she works, a tune from years before. You hear laughter, real laughter behind closed doors. It startles you every time. You find yourself watching the sky obsessively, waiting for rain, half expecting disaster to come back at any moment. But the days stay dry, the clouds drift past. Sometimes the wind brings the scent of distant fires, people burning away the last of the ruined hay, making space for something new. The smell is sharp but not unpleasant, a cleansing, not a threat. A joke makes the rounds. If you see someone smiling, check if they found a potato. The humour is dark, but it's humour all the same. You laugh, even as you scan the fields, counting shoots, praying each green tip will survive. Old rituals come back, hesitant at first. The priest organises a blessing for the fields. People gather, awkward, uncertain, their voices thin as they chant the old prayers. The sun shines down, and for a moment you can almost believe in miracles. Even the most sceptical among you bow their heads. You notice the animals return too. Birds sing in the hedges, rabbits dart through the new grass. The wild is still close, but no longer so frightening. The line between tame and wild softens. Fields are ploughed, but patches of bramble are left for berries, trees for shade. You learn to work with the land, not against it. Historians point out that, after the famine, some villages never truly recovered. Others grew smaller, tighter, changed in ways that lasted generations. New ways of farming took root. New customs grew. You see it happening. Neighbours sharing seeds, pooling tools, trading skills instead of coins. There's less pride, more patience. Everyone knows the cost of isolation. A fringe custom appears. Before planting the first seeds, you and your siblings write your wishes on scraps of bark. Bury them at the edge of the field. Grow, 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 you whisper, and press the dirt down tight. Your mother laughs at the ritual, but later you see her tuck a tiny charm into the furrow just in case. The world is not healed, far from it. There are still empty houses, still memories that ache, still days when the cupboard is too bare and the work too hard. But there is motion now, a slow turning toward the future. You feel it in your bones, in the way you stretch each morning, in the way the village moves with purpose. You help mend the roof of the old schoolhouse, hands raw, knees scraped. Children chase each other through the yard, their voices high, unbroken by sorrow. You watch and wonder how long the peace will last. There's a kind of humility that comes with surviving famine. You cherish what you have, expect little, celebrate small victories. A loaf baked without mould, a day without rain, a handful of beans sprouting green. These are treasures. You learn to share again, to trust, to hope. As summer advances, the fields fill with green. The village sets a date for the first feast in years. Not a real feast, just a shared meal, a symbol. Everyone brings what they can. Roots, beans, berries, a precious egg or two. You gather on the green, pass the food hand to hand, and for a moment you feel like a community again. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, remembering the empty nights, the vanished faces. The losses are still there, but they're not all you have. The world is coming back, not as it was, but as it will be. A child stands up and shouts, "The famine is over!" The adults laugh, gently, not quite believing, but not denying either. You sit in the sun, feeling the warmth on your skin, the ache in your muscles, the quiet in your heart. The worst has passed, you have survived. You watch the sunset, the sky streaked with gold and purple, and let yourself hope, truly hope, for the first time in years. And when night falls, you sleep with the window open, listening to the soft sounds of a world remaking itself. You dream of planting, of harvest, of voices returning to fill the quiet. The dark no longer feels so empty. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new worries, new work. But tonight, you rest. Tonight, you are home. Harvest comes later than you remember and smaller, but it comes all the same. You wake to a world bright with dew and hope, the sky washed clean. All summer, you and your family have coaxed the soil, planting what you could, tending every green shoot as if it were gold. The fields are patchwork, some places lush, others bare, but everywhere you look something is growing. Every stalk is a victory. On the day the first barley is cut, you walk the furrows with your father, both of you silent, awestruck. You run your fingers through the rough heads of grain, brush dirt from your knees, and let yourself believe you'll eat well tonight. The work is hard, harder than any winter hunger, but the pain in your arms and back feels like proof that you're alive. Mainstream historians mark these first post-famine harvests as some of the most hard-won in memory. Yields are low, fields still patchy, but the mere fact of survival is enough to spark cautious celebration. "We plant with hope and reap with patience," your mother says, quoting some old proverb, and everyone nods, too tired to cheer but unwilling to mourn. You notice how careful everyone is. Every kernel of grain is gathered, every bean and turnip counted. Gone are the days of careless waste. You save the chaff for the hens, the peels for the soup pot, the cracked beans for next year's seed. Nothing is thrown away. The famine taught us thrift, your uncle says, and you see it everywhere, in the patched clothes, the mended tools, the way even laughter seems to be doled out in smaller, more precious portions. But laughter does return. It's quiet at first, almost shy, as if afraid to draw the wrath of the sky. You catch it in the pauses between work, in the playful scoldings of mothers and the songs of children. One afternoon, your sister tells a joke so old you all groan, then burst out laughing just for the joy of it. "Better a stale joke than a stale loaf," your father says, and the laughter rolls on, warm as bread from the oven. A quirky tidbit emerges. To mark the end of the famine, some families bury a loaf of old, hard bread at the edge of their fields. "For the hungry ghosts," your grandmother explains, "let them eat in peace, so we can eat in joy." You and your siblings sneak out one night, loaf in hand, giggling as you press it into the earth beneath a rowan tree. When you return, your mother pretends not to notice your muddy knees but kisses you all anyway. Historians still debate whether rituals like these, baking Thanksgiving bread, holding silent feasts for the dead, were acts of superstition or simply ways of marking survival. Some say the old practices were revived to bring comfort, others that they were invented anew to make sense of loss. You find you don't care which is true. What matters is the feeling of connection, the sense that you've outlasted the worst together. As the harvest is gathered in, the village holds its breath. No one knows if there will be enough to last the winter. The memory of hunger lingers in every shadow. When the wind howls at night, you still flinch, remembering the empty pots and the cold that crept into your bones. But your hands are fuller now, full of grain, of work, of possibility. You see new signs of life everywhere. A neighbour builds a new roof from scavenged timber. Children chase each other through the stubble, shrieking with delight. Someone strings a garland of dried apples above the hearth, the scent sharp and sweet. Even the animals seem livelier. Hens pecking, a goat kicking up its heels, the old cat sunning itself on the threshold as if nothing bad ever happened. Yet there is a fragility to the joy, a wariness that runs deep. No one boasts about full larders. Meals are still simple: stew, porridge, flatbread, maybe a bite of cheese if you're lucky. But every meal is eaten slowly, every mouthful cherished. Chew each bite as if it's your last, your mother says, half joking, half remembering. You notice the change in yourself too. You're more patient, more willing to share, less quick to anger. You've learned what matters: family, warmth, kindness, a patch of sunlight on the floor. You treasure the smallest comforts: the feel of clean water on your hands, the sound of rain that falls and stops, the roughness of bread crust against your teeth. A rumour passes that in a distant city the king himself has ordered new granaries to be built, new laws to protect the poor. Some scoff, others nod. Mainstream historians say the famine changed not just hearts but laws, new ideas about charity, about safety nets, about what it means to be a good neighbour. You see the beginnings of this in your own village. People share seeds, offer tools, trade help instead of coin. A spirit of quiet generosity takes root, born from shared suffering. A fringe story goes around. Some say that, during the famine, angels walk the fields at night, leaving dew on the grain as a blessing. Others claim to have seen lights moving through the woods, spirits perhaps, or the ghosts of those lost to hunger. You don't know what to believe, but you light a candle for the dead all the same, whispering their names as you watch the flame dance. Historians still debate whether communities like yours ever truly recovered, or simply learned to live with a new kind of caution. You sense both truths at once. Life goes on, but the shadow of loss is always close. In the evenings, the village gathers in smaller groups, around the hearth, in the fields, by the edge of the woods. You share stories of the old days, of the famine, of dreams for the future. Some people talk about moving, seeking a better life elsewhere. Others vow never to leave, to rebuild, to remember. You find yourself drawn to the rhythms of the land, the turning of the seasons, the slow healing of the soil, the way hope grows in silence. You plant seeds not just for food, but for the promise of tomorrow. Each day is a step further from hunger, a step closer to peace. When the last of the harvest is in, the village holds a feast. It's not lavish, but it is joyful. Stew and bread, apples roasted over the fire, a jug of sour wine passed hand to hand. You eat with gratitude, with reverence, with the memory of emptiness still sharp in your mind. You remember those who are gone. Raise a cup to their memory, and let your tears fall without shame. As night falls, you sit with your family, bellies full, hearts lighter. The world is changed, but you have survived. You promise yourself never to take any of it for granted. Not a single meal, not a single day. You drift to sleep that night with the scent of harvest in your hair, the warmth of family around you, and the quiet knowledge that, though the famine has shaped you, it has not broken you. The world is fragile, but it is also resilient. Tomorrow you will rise with the sun, ready to begin again. There's a moment, after a disaster passes, when the silence feels too wide. You expect to fill it with celebration, but instead you find yourself tiptoeing around the quiet, afraid to disturb it. The village stands still in the autumn dusk, the fields gold and brown, the air sharp with the coming chill. You hear your own breath, the low clatter of dishes from a neighbour's kitchen, the distant bark of a dog, ordinary sounds, made precious by their return. The worst of the famine is over, but the world it leaves behind is not the same. You notice the gaps first, houses with shuttered windows, gardens choked with weeds, paths once trodden bare, now green with moss. The absences are everywhere. The family who left and never returned, the old woman whose chair by the door sits empty, the children who should have been running under the apple trees but are not. Mainstream historians write that famine changed not only bodies, but hearts and minds. The survivors bear its marks, on their faces, in the way they move, in the caution that shadows every choice. You see it in yourself, in your neighbours, in the careful way everyone approaches abundance, never trusting that it will last. Food is no longer just food. It's a memory, a promise, a weight. Each loaf of bread is divided carefully, every crumb swept from the table and saved for the next day. Your mother still counts potatoes twice, just to be sure. Your father tucks the last onions deep in straw, as if hoarding for another winter. The habits of hunger don't fade easily. The fields, too, are changed. Where once you planted wheat in every row, now you stagger crops. Barley here, beans there, patches of peas and turnips, anything to hedge against another year gone wrong. You leave strips of wildflower for the bees, let the hedgerows grow thick. The land seems to breathe easier too, no longer forced but coaxed and tended. You notice the village itself is closer now. You and your neighbours share more. Tools, seeds, gossip, songs. There's less talk of mine and yours. Suffering has made you all kin. You watch as children share crusts in the lane, as women help patch each other's roofs, as men pull strength for a new well at the edge of the green. A quirky tidbit. The old traditions return with new meaning. At the first frost, you gather in the square and throw a bundle of dry twigs on a bonfire, singing a song about keeping winter at bay. Someone brings a pot of honeyed milk, someone else a pie baked from the year's last apples. You eat in the smoky dark, laughter mingling with the crackle of the fire. The story goes that as long as the fire burns, no one will go hungry this winter. You let yourself believe, if only for a night. Historians still argue about how much was lost and how much remade in the years after the Great Famine. Some claim communities fractured, never to recover. Others see resilience, the slow weaving of new bonds. In your heart, it's both. Some wounds stay open, but around them grows something tough and tangled, a net that holds everyone up. You see new faces now and then, strangers passing through, looking for a place to start again. Some you welcome, some move on, but every addition feels like a stitch in a mending cloth. Old rivalries are set aside. Even the family that once quarrelled with yours over a field or a well comes to share soup and news. The hunger made everyone humble. You find yourself drawn to the old routines, helping in the kitchen, tending the fire, sharing the work of the land. There's comfort in repetition, in the small certainties, a loaf rising in the oven, a row of carrots green above the frost, the slow swelling of rainwater in the barrel outside the door. You treasure every ordinary moment, knowing how easily the world can break. Yet for all the peace, grief lingers. On some evenings, your mother stands in the doorway, counting stars, her lips moving in silent remembrance. You join her sometimes, hands clasped, hearts heavy. You tell stories of those who are gone, how the baker sang at sunrise, how the old man danced a jig at the last wedding, how your sister once caught a fish with her bare hands and laughed all the way home. The stories are a kind of food, filling the spaces loss has left behind. Children are born and named for those lost. Old songs are sung in new voices. The seasons turn, and each turn feels like both blessing and risk. No one takes the future for granted. You learn to plant extra, to store extra, to hope carefully. You notice how even laughter has changed. It comes more often now, brighter and louder, but it carries an edge. an understanding of what it means to go without, to come close to losing everything. The jokes are sharper, the stories bolder. When someone makes a mistake in the field or the kitchen, no one scolds. You laugh together, grateful to have anything left to laugh about. A new rumour arrives with a travelling merchant. Another region has been struck by hail, the fields flattened, the harvest ruined. You listen, hearts tight, and send what little you can spare. A sack of beans, a pot of preserves, a scrap of comfort for those still caught in the storm. May it come back to us, your mother says, tucking the offering into the merchant's cart. Kindness is the best seed. Historians say that, in the wake of the famine, communities across Europe grew more generous, more willing to help the stranger at the door. New laws and customs grew up to feed the poor, to care for the sick, to mourn the dead. Not all of it lasted, but some of it did. You see it in the way your own village greets every newcomer, remembers every absent friend. You grow older, measuring time not just in seasons, but in what has been lost and found. Your body is thinner, your eyes more watchful, but your heart is strong. You know what matters. You keep a loaf hidden on high shelf, a handful of seeds in a jar, a story for every night you cannot sleep. When winter comes, it comes softly. There are nights when the wind rattles the shutters and you huddle by the fire, but you're not afraid. You know the hunger could return, but you also know you have survived it once, and you're not alone. You eat your supper, share your laughter, and thank the world for each ordinary blessing. You find beauty in the new world, the moss on the old wall, the warmth of a borrowed coat, the hush of snow falling on a quiet roof. You hold your family close, remembering every meal you missed, every friend you lost, every kindness that pulled you through. The famine is over, but its lessons linger. You are different now, wiser perhaps, and certainly more grateful. You wake each day ready to begin again, to shape the world with gentle hands, to keep the memory of loss alive as a promise to cherish what you have. And so you settle into this new life, stronger for what you have endured, softer for what you have lost, bound to your village by invisible threads of kindness and sorrow and hope. You drift to sleep each night, the warmth of family beside you, the peace of enough in your heart. The hardest winters always seem longest in memory, but even the coldest nights must pass. So now, as you lie beneath your blanket, safe, fed and wrapped in the hush of a world rebuilt, you let your breathing slow. The shadows on the wall grow softer, the little sounds of the house, creaking beams, the tick of cooling stones, grow distant, gentle, almost musical. You remember how hunger changed everything, how you endured what you thought you could not, how the village and the wild and the old ways all found their balance once more. Some losses will never fade, and that's all right, because woven through every sorrow is the bright thread of survival. You carry those memories, and they carry you. Tonight you don't have to plan or worry. You don't have to count or share or save. The world outside is quiet. The hunger is gone. You've learned to notice the warmth in your hands, the softness of your pillow, the kindness in a shared glance. Even the simplest comfort is precious now, and you let yourself savour it without fear. Maybe you hear the faintest echo of laughter from another room, or the gentle sigh of a loved one asleep beside you. You let those sounds settle over you like a blessing, softening every edge, dimming every care. Let the world spin onward, slow and sure, carrying you into tomorrow. You have survived, scarred, changed, but still here. That is enough. So rest, Janu, knowing the worst is behind you. May your dreams be gentle and sweet, your heart light, your sleep deep and safe.